Good afternoon. I want to call this work session of the Durham City Council to order at 1 o'clock on Thursday, May the 20th. And I certainly want to welcome everyone here today, my colleagues, our wonderful staff, and all those who may be attending in one form or another. We're very, very glad to have you. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Schewel?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson?
Here.
Councilmember Caballero?
Here.
Councilmember Freelon?
Here.
Councilmember Freeman? Councilmember Middleton?
I'm here.
Councilmember Reese?
Here.
Thank you.
And I
Thank you,
think I missed you, Diana.
Here she comes. Councilmember Freeman's here, Madam Clerk.
Thank you very much.
Colleagues, Councilmember Middleton is going to have to leave our meeting early today. We're going to rearrange a little bit of the agenda so that he can be here for one of the important items. I'm going to ask our attorney, Madam Attorney, can we go ahead and give Councilmember Middleton, how should we handle his excused absence for part of this meeting?
You can just call for the motion, Mr. Mayor, to excuse Councilmember Middleton from the remaining items of the meeting at the time of his departure.
All right, thank you. We'll do that. Colleagues, also, Councilmember Caballero is going to be traveling and will be missing the... No, that's not true. Okay, good. We're good. I thought we had another excused absence, but turns out not. Okay, great. We'll now move on to announcements by members of the council. All right, seeing none, which is probably good because we have a brutal agenda. Councilmember Freeman.
Thank you. I just wanted to just make a note or bring it forward that I want to figure out how to put together a resolution around this critical race theory bill that's going through in the House. I just want to make sure that we get in front of it. And so just noting that for the rest of you. I'll try to get something together before our next meeting.
Councilmember, that's a great idea. I think that one thought I have, I'm not sure what the timing of that is in the legislature, if it's going to be moving more quickly than when we next meet, perhaps a letter that is drafted that we could sign would also be good. So I know we're hearing from people about this, and if you could ask someone who's working on this to draft such a letter, that might get us out in front of it a little quicker. But
yeah, I think I'm going to work with Senator Murdoch on it.
Perfect.
So.
That'd be awesome. Thank you for bringing that up.
No problem.
All right, colleagues. If there are no further announcements, we'll move into priority items by the city manager.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, members of the Durham City Council. I have a few priority items for you this afternoon. Again, I apologize for the lengthy agenda. It is that season, and we will get through it as quickly as we can. Agenda item number 45, the U.S. Department of Transportation, Federal Aviation Administration, Airport Coronavirus Response Grant Program. Grant offer 3-370056-054-2021 is a supplemental item that has been awarded. This grant is being awarded to RDU Airport for COVID-related expenses and must be approved and executed no later than June 1st of 2021. U.S. Department of Transportation, Federal Aviation Administration, Airport Coronavirus Response Grant Program, Airport Concessions Addendum, Grant offer 3-37-0056-055-2021, another supplemental item that has been added. This grant to the Raleigh-Durham Airport Authority allows RDU to provide relief from rent and minimum annual guarantees to airport concessions, car rental, and parking. This addendum must be approved and executed no later than June 1st, 2021. The council is being asked to suspend the rules and vote on those items today at the work session. Also, agenda item number 12, amend the fiscal year 2020-2021 budget. Pursuant to council's request, additional information has been provided as attachment number 3. Agenda item number 28, fiscal year 2020-2021, third quarter financial report, there will be a presentation made on this item. Agenda item number 30, development agreement with Lambert Development, Hunt Street 2, LLC. A brief presentation will also be made on this item. And we have one citizens matter today, and that matter will be by Hillary Ensminger, and that has been added. And finally, Mayor and Council, I have a couple of people here that I would like to briefly introduce to you. I am very excited to welcome Leela Peterson and Dr. Dwayne Campbell to the City of Durham as two of our 4 Fuse Fellows. And I would like for them to turn their cameras on, because these Fuse Fellows will be helping the city advance important strategic priorities. The Fuse Fellows program places individuals with significant experience in the private and nonprofit sectors into year-long fellowships serving local governments at no cost to the local unit of government. Leela comes to us most recently from the North Carolina Justice Center, where she served as a policy analyst, and from New America, where she served as the Associate Director, managing a leadership development program for social entrepreneurs. She will carry forward some of the work of the Recovery and Renewal Task Force, including identifying and advancing strategies that support our ongoing economic recovery, supporting the vaccine equity efforts, and supporting Interim Deputy Manager Bertha Johnson in the strategic development of our American Rescue Plan federal funds. Dr. Dwayne Campbell comes to us most recently from the Emily K. Center, where he served as the Director of Post-Secondary Access, and from UNC, where he served as a lead evaluator for the Center for Health Promotion and Disease Prevention. Dwayne will support the work of the Durham's Community Safety and Wellness Task Force, as well as the work of the proposed Community Safety Department. Leela and Dwayne, welcome to our organization, and we are fortunate to have you both dedicated to supporting this work for the next year. And that concludes my priority items, Mr. Mayor and Council.
Thank you very much, Madam Manager. I'll first take a motion that we accept the manager's priority items.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Johnson, seconded by Councilmember Reese, that we accept the manager's priority items. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Schewel?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson?
Aye.
Councilmember Caballero?
Aye.
Councilmember Freelon?
Aye.
Councilmember Freeman?
Aye.
Councilmember Middleton?
I vote aye.
Councilmember Reese?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And to Mr. Campbell and Ms. Peterson, we are thrilled to have you in the city. I know you've already hit the ground running. We've already heard reports of your work, and we appreciate it very, very much. We're super excited to have you. Props to Mayor Pro Tem Johnson, who first helped us make the connection to Fuse Fellows, and the manager jumped right on it, and we've got more coming. And this is a super exciting opportunity for the city, and we hope that this will also be a great opportunity for you, Ms. Peterson and Mr. Campbell. Let me just add that, Mr. Campbell, I didn't know you had previously worked at an organization that has my favorite nickname, Hippy Dippy, the Center for Health Promotion and Disease Prevention. Next to the Center for Advanced Hindsight, I think Hippy Dippy is probably the best name around. But we're thrilled to have both of you all, and look forward to working both closely with both of you. Thank you so much.
And I would just add to Dr. Campbell and Ms. Peterson, thank you for being here, and thank you for all of the work that you're going to do to help us advance these priorities of this community.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all both, and thank you, Madam Manager. Madam Attorney, any items any priority items this afternoon?
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, and members of the City Council. The City Attorney's Office does not have priority items today.
Thank you, Madam Attorney. Yes, Madam Clerk, any priority items today?
Afternoon, everyone. The city clerk's office has no priority items today.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. All right, colleagues, we'll now move into our administrative consent items. This is long. You might want to take a nap while I'm reading. It's just a big one. What can I say? The city clerk's office, item 1, approval of city council minutes. Item 2, citizens advisory committee appointments. And I believe, Councilmember Reese, did you have something that you wanted to say about this item? Item 2.
I think I spoke with the clerk, and it looks like we have 4 votes to reappoint the 3 folks who are reapplying and re-advertise for the other 3 positions. And I think that's what we're going to do. Okay,
thanks. Item 3, Durham Board of Adjustment appointments. Item 4, Durham Open Space and Trails Commission appointment. I do have one question about that, and I'm sorry, I should have asked the clerk this earlier. The person lists their addresses in Chapel Hill. I know that there's some postal addresses in Chapel Hill that are in the Durham city limits, Madam Clerk, but I think that would be worth checking out. Item 5, Durham Planning Commission appointments. Item 6, Durham Sports Commission appointment. Item 7, Housing Appeals Board appointment. Item 8, Human Relations Commission appointments.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Sorry, I also had a question about item 8. I don't know if I should pull it or just ask now. So previously when we've done HRC appointments, we've done them by race and gender, but this appointment asked us to just pick by race. I was wondering why that change was made.
Let's see if the clerk has some thoughts about that.
I had a request by the Human Relations Commission that asked us to just advertise persons so that we would not be discriminating against persons' genders.
Thank you, Madam
So I
Clerk.
believe as listed here, the bylaws require that genders be equally represented. I don't know how we manage that without the previous system. I guess it's just something we should talk more about, because I'm worried that the gender balance will become skewed if we continue to use this system.
Okay, let me know what you folks want to do. Thank you.
Thanks.
Councilmember Freeland and then Councilmember Caballero.
Yeah, this is something, Jilly, that's come up a couple times in the HRC, and the vice chair, Michael, has been the head of the folks looking at the bylaws. Basically, the interpretation of the bylaws is that no one group makes over a certain percentage, and I think they've accounted for that in how they're re-advertising. So it's different than what we're used to, but it achieves the same goal in a slightly different way that allows for gender nonconforming folks to not have to apply with the binary. So that's something we could probably talk about in more detail to get to the bottom of, but Michael would be the guy to talk to, because that's been like a thing we've been talking about for the past 6 months.
Okay, thanks. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, well, we should figure something out in the bylaws that makes sense. Because right now, for example, if we had picked all women or all men for the appointment, then we would not be in compliance with the bylaws, and we had the opportunity to do that today. I'm sure we haven't, but I think we're going to need a bylaws change to make that work. And I feel comfortable with I agree that that's an important consideration, that folks who don't identify as either gender shouldn't have to identify as one or the other to serve on the board. And I trust y'all can figure something out that works.
Cool.
Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Caballero and Councilmember Freeman.
What Councilmember Freeland just shared. It's
Thank you.
51%. There can't be a one, whatever gender, it doesn't matter.
All right. Councilmember Freeman.
I was just going to ask if there have been, so in the conversations that you're having at the HRC, is the focus, I get you trying not to get over 51%, but the focus on persons could also erase women. And so I just want to make sure that we're clear that you can't erase women for non-binary. That's not equity.
Thank you, Council Member. I think all these are very important points, and it's complicated. And we'll allow Councilmember Freeline, if you don't mind, to work with the HRC and the bylaws. And it's also complicated for the clerk's office. And we appreciate, Madam Clerk, all that you all do to try to maneuver appropriately in these spaces. Thank you. I'm going to go back to item 4. I see Ms. Rowland has an answer for us. Ms. Rowland.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. I know you had a question about item 4 and the applicant's address. Even though it's listed in Chapel Hill, Go Maps tells me that he is still Ward 3 resident.
Great. Thank you very much, Ms. Rowland. That's just exactly what we needed to know. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All righty. We'll move to item, I believe I've already read item 8, but if not, Human Relations Commission appointments. Item 9, Mayor's Council for Women appointments. Item 10, Participatory Budget Steering Committee appointment. Departmental items. Item 11, Audit Services Department. Neighborhood Improvement. Item 11, Neighborhood Improvement Services, NIS, Lien Process Performance Audit, dated April 2021.
Pull that, Mr. Mayor.
Sure. Item 12, amend the fiscal year 2021 budget. Under the Community Development Department, item 13, amendment of operating agreement with Volunteers of America Carolinas, Inc., VOAC, to provide services for homelessness coordinated entry with diversion. I don't want to pull it, but I do want to congratulate the department and this group on fantastic results for our neediest residents. These are very, very good results. Item 14, contract for Habitat for Humanity of Durham to administer the City of Durham Minor Repair Program and application intake for the Substantial Rehabilitation and Home Consortium Rehabilitation Programs.
Mr. Mayor, I don't want to pull it, but I do want to caution staff around just assigning to Habitat for Humanity and not taking into account other folks who actually provide that service as well.
Thank you, Council Member. Item 15, contract for Homeless Management Information System, HMIS lead agency. Item 16, lead hazard control application intake and eligibility screening services contract with a partnership effort for the advancement of children's health, PEACH. Item 17, I'm sorry. Item 16, yeah. Item 17, lead hazard control marketing and outreach services contract with a partnership effort for the advancement of children's health, PEACH. Item 18, Department of Transportation 2020 Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Council BPAC Annual Report. Item 19, interlocal agreement with Durham County for consolidation of access services. Colleagues, I have asked the manager sometime in the next few months to give us an update on Durham Access. I think it's something we could all stand to learn something about. Item 20, under Department of Water Management, item 20, 2021 Lift Station Improvements Group A, Gravity Sewer Professional Engineering Services Contract to McKim and Creed Incorporated. Item 21, 2021 Lift Station Improvements Group A, Lift Stations Professional Engineering Services Contract to Highfield Infrastructure Engineering, PC. Item 22, 2021 Lift Station Improvements Group B, Lift Stations Professional Engineering Services Contract with Kimberly Horn and Associates Incorporated. Item 23, amendment number 3 for engineering services from Raymond Engineering, Georgia for various Department of Water Management roof replacements.
Mr. Mayor, I don't want to pull item.
Yeah.
But I did want to ask Mr. Greeley, if he's listening, to get in touch with me separately so that I could schedule a tour of those facilities. And I would be really interested in doing that. Thank you, Mr.
That's great. I am sure Mr. Greeley will do that, and maybe some of the others of us would enjoy going. Thank you. Item 24, Newman Street Waterline Construction Contract Award. Item 25, South Durham Water Reclamation Facility Administration Building Renovations, Amendment number 1 for DTW Architects and Planners Limited. Item 26, Water Treatment Plant Residual and Water Reclamation Facility Biosolid Services, Amendment number 1 to contract with Sinagro Central Limited Liability Company. Under the Finance Department Annual Insurance Plan FY22. Continuing under finance, FY 2021 third quarter financial report, and this is a presentation item. Item 29, resolution approving the application to the local government commission for the issuance of water, sewer utility system revenue bonds. I'm going to pull this item 29. Under General Services Department, item 30, development agreement with Lambert Development Hunt Street LLC, and this is also a presentation item. Under item 31, lease with Salon Lofts Group LLC at the Morgan Rigsby parking garage. Under Human Resources Department, item 32, contract renewal of SABA subscription and services agreement with SABA Software Canada, Inc. Under the Public Works Department, item 33, contract ST317 utility locate services.
Can we pull that, Mr. Mayor?
Yep. Under item 34, contract with WK Dixon and Company Incorporated for a stormwater municipal separate storm sewer system MS4 program review. Item 35, petition process assessment rate revisions. Item 36, residential septic to sewer cost share project for the Northeast Creek watershed. Under Technology Solutions Department, item 37, contract renewal with Granicus LLC, DBA Granicus SAAS LLC. Under Presentations, Department of Transportation, item 38, the Greater Triangle Commuter Rail GTCR study update. Under Public Hearings, Budget and Management Services Department, item 39, fiscal year 21-22 budget and fiscal year 2022-27 capital improvement plan. Under City County Planning Department, item 40, plan amendment, Camden Avenue tier change. Under item 41, zoning map change, Rollingdale 2. Under Community Development Department, Coronavirus Aid Relief and Economic Security CARES Act, public hearing on approval of Second Amendment to the FY 2021 Annual Action Plan and 2025 Consolidated Plan. Under Citizens Matters, Hillary Ensminger, item 43. Under Supplemental Items, City Council's Office, 44, creation and implementation of program to support achieving vaccine equity. Under City Manager's Office, item 45, U.S. Department of Transportation and Federal Aviation Administration Airport Coronavirus Response Grant Program, grant offer 337-0056-054-2021. This is one of the items that the manager has asked us to act on, but I'm going to come back to this for reasons I'll explain in a moment. Item 46, U.S. Department of Transportation, Federal Aviation Administration Airport Coronavirus Response Grant Program, Airport Concessions Addendum, grant offer 337-0056-055-2021, and we'll also come back to that. Madam Manager, the items that I have pulled are 11, 16, 29, and 33. The presentation items are 28, 30, 38, and 40, 38, and 38. Item 44 has also been pulled. I should have mentioned that. I'm sorry. And then items 45 and 46 are the supplemental items that we will come back to in a moment. Is that what you have, Madam Manager?
It is what I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Colleagues, I really am, Councilmember Middleton, as you all know, has to leave the meeting early, and but it would be good if he was able to be here for item 44. He's done a lot of good work on this. Councilmember Middleton, are you with us still?
I am, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to have to go mobile, so forgive me for not being able to turn the camera on.
No problem. Colleagues, I really wanted to do this. Councilmember Middleton kindly offered to do this before he needs to preside at a funeral this afternoon. And so we're going to go ahead and move this item up. This is the vaccine equity item. And I had originally proposed that we contract with Cure Americas Global for this. After some discussions, as you all remember, I had proposed instead an RFP process. Councilmember Middleton and several of you all questioned the necessity for that. We had a brief discussion about it last week. Decided to bring it back to this work, or on Monday, decided to bring it back to this work session. And Councilmember Middleton has had some important discussion in the meantime, which has led to, I think, our ability to go back and indeed do what we had originally hoped to do, which is contract with Cure Americas Global to do the work so we can get started quickly. And the manager has been involved in these discussions. I'll just ask Councilmember Middleton if he would like to say anything at this point to move us along.
I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, colleagues, for the incredible amount of just graciousness and leeway with my schedule today. As has already been mentioned, I'll be presiding at the funeral of one of the young men who were killed in our city by gun violence last week. So I want to thank you for allowing me to be with that family. And also, I understand this is an important and critical time in the work of the council and for the city. And it's all hands on deck, so I don't take lightly you working with me and moving the schedule around today. The agenda allowed me to speak to this. So let me just briefly say, by way of framing, I am not, by way of disclosure, I was not fully read in on the issues surrounding the recommended vendor for this. What prompts me and what motivated me, as I said at our last meeting, I'll say it again today. I think that there's nothing more important than getting Black and brown people vaccinated, particularly as the country opens back up. And that is my prime motivator. The reason why I pulled the issue, the reason why I raised the question about the RFP versus just naming a vendor is solely based upon my belief that this is perhaps the most important thing, if not the most, certainly one of the most important things we've been doing relative to our COVID response. The mayor just recently issued a statement to rescind, revoke the stay-at-home order. I think that's an important watershed. And I really see this item as perhaps the last great iteration under emergency powers. This is like the final chapter, I think, of the way we've had to operate in that special kind of COVID emergency context in which we've operated. And I think that given that if there's any solace to be taken, we're going to get back to regular order. We're getting back to regular order. But this is really, I think, the last piece that deserves that special kind of expedited consideration, particularly given the subject matter. When we look at disparities in vaccines for the Black and brown community, for me, if there's anything we were going to be expeditious about, and with all due deference to back on the ball and getting money to our businesses, if there's anything we're going to be expeditious about, I think it's closing or at least attempting to close the disparities in vaccine rates for Black and brown folk, particularly considering that the country is opening back up. So that's a commercial just to say that's the only dog I had in this fight. That's the only reason why I pulled the issue. And pursuant to me pulling it, I did have opportunity to have a discussion. And I want to take this time to shout out our colleague on the county commissioners, Commissioner Namashina Burns, who I think is an incredibly important voice in our public square. I did have opportunity to have conversation with her about it. It should be said that, in fairness to her, at no point did Commissioner Burns, at least it was communicated to me, intend to block this or to derail it or to hold it up in any way. But what she was concerned about, and I think we all should be concerned about, were some issues that were raised about the particular vendor that we're identifying. Now, I want to be very careful because I don't want to errantly or in some flippant way impugn the reputation of any vendor or anyone who does business with the city. As I said, I wasn't fully read in or dialed in on what the concerned issues are, but I will say this. I trust that the mayor of our city would do at least reasonable due diligence and would not bring a group before us that he had concerns about. I just trust that he wouldn't do that. And if he does, that's another conversation we'll have to have down the road. And this council certainly isn't afraid to have those kind of conversations. But in my conversation with her, she did raise what I thought were some legitimate concerns about prioritizing CBOs in our own community and making sure that CBOs are paid in a timely manner. She raised important concerns that all of us should be brought into about due diligence when it comes to city coffers and county coffers, making sure that our money is spent correctly in the ways that we want it to be spent. That's something that we all should be concerned about. So her concerns, I think, should be taken seriously and noted. And I want to echo them. And I want to echo that she was attempting to look out and is attempting to look out for the county's money and the city's money, not to block anything. The importance of getting vaccines in the arms of Black and brown people isn't lost on any of us that elected elected in the city and county. So I would say this, again, I think that I'm prepared to move the motion forward, or a new motion forward, and I think our city attorney has crafted some language, a new motion naming Cure Americas. And I will say this, by way of advisory to our friends listening. This is not the city, and this is not the issue, and this is not the pot of money for there to be any shenanigans surrounding. I'll just put it that way. This is not the issue, because this is nothing short of Black and brown lives at stake in this issue. And if anything were to go left, I can assure folk listening that the blowback would be direct, it would be constant, and it would be withering. And I feel safe characterizing it that way because I would be leading the blowback. So with that said, I think that this is an important issue. I think this is the last great flexing, if you will, under emergency emergency footing for the city. I think it's incredibly important that we get the work of vaccine equity on track as quickly as possible, particularly given the disparities in the community, for Black and brown community relative to the white community in terms of vaccination rates. I'm deferring to my colleagues who have recommended Cure Americas, and I'm also advising everybody in the public square and everybody who's seeking to do business with the city that we expect excellence, we expect due diligence, and we expect accountability when we make this investment, because this is an issue that goes straight to the heart of our city, and that is saving the lives and protecting the lives of Black and brown people and marginalized people in our city. So with that said, Mr. Mayor, I think, at least as my understanding and where I am, that we should be comfortable forwarding a motion, and I'll be glad to forward that motion to proceed with a non-RFP, proceed without an RFP, and contract with Cure Americas to lead our efforts for vaccine equity.
Thank you very much, Council Member, and thank you for having those discussions. Colleagues, I'll first ask for discussion, then we will need to move to suspend the rules and vote on this item as we'd agreed to at Monday night's meeting, and then we can take up the motion. But I'll next invite discussion. Councilmember Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate Councilmember Middleton reaching out to Commissioner Burns. I think what resonates for me in this conversation isn't really around the organization. It's also around the process and acknowledging how much of an emergency this is. And when you're in an emergency, what you rely on is the way that you operate from a stance of what's been going on. I mean, throughout time. And I just want to just echo again that it's important for us to invest in our local community. It's important to invest in our community-based organizations. It's important to make sure that we're using our tax dollars to do those things, and to make sure that we're doing it as quickly as possible, acknowledging that this is a health emergency. I do have some concerns about the wherewithal, because I also have not been read on the issues with Cure America, and I'm hearing there's some issues with Cure America, and I just want to be on the record and state, and the Cure America piece is the only piece that's bothering me in this, and that if there were some other organization, I mean, namely any other organization that was named to assist in this process, it would seem a whole lot more seamless and a lot less problematic. Just acknowledging how local organizations are kind of being passed over in this. I note that there was a comment that I'd heard Commissioner Burns mention that when you squeeze a sponge, you kind of get at the core of what's happening in this situation. And what you do when you're being squeezed is what you do when you're at your core. And at my core, I want to support our local businesses, our local nonprofit organizations that are doing the work on the ground. And sending $650,000 to an organization that is not here in Durham is problematic for me at the least. And there are just namely a few things that I'm not certain on with the organization that still just don't sit well with me. And that being said, I'm willing to support the will of the council, acknowledging that this is an emergency. I thank Councilmember Middleton for having a conversation with Commissioner Burns. And I thank Commissioner Burns for raising the issues, as acknowledging that, I mean, we have a plethora of organizations that could all be the receivers of these dollars. So thank you.
Thank you, council member. Madam Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to appreciate Councilmember Middleton's efforts with getting this to the finish line. I think if we had not had the conversation, if he had not broached the conversation on Monday about going back and trying to work this out with the county commissioners, we would have moved forward with an RFP. We would have had to wait a lot longer to get these funds out into the community, and now we're going to be able to do it more quickly with the support of the folks on the county commission. So I just wanted to thank Councilmember Middleton for the work that he did to make that happen. And if there's no further discussion, I'm happy to make a motion to suspend the rules.
I'll second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. I do just have one other thing to say, which just to be clear is that of the $650,000, roughly $600,000 will be going to local community-based organizations. So just want to be clear that the money will be spent with our organizations in Durham. All right, Council, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, your motion.
Yeah, I move we suspend the rules.
Is that moved by Madam Mayor Pro Tem that we suspend the rules and vote? Councilmember Reese seconded. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Schul,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Caballero,
Aye.
Councilmember Freelon,
Aye.
Councilmember Freeman,
Abstain.
Councilmember, I don't think you can abstain. You have to, if you're here, you have to either vote yes or no.
I abstain.
Okay, go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Middleton,
I vote aye.
Councilmember Reese.
Aye.
Thank you. The ayes have it, and the motion passes. Madam Attorney, maybe you can give us an interpretation of what an abstain would mean in this case.
So, Mr. Mayor, I think because we're still operating under Session Law 2020-3, the remote meeting statute, votes are by voice call. And so if a member does not vote yay or nay, there's just one less vote.
All right, thank you. All right, the ayes have it, and the motion passes 6-0. Now we will need a motion to approve the contract with Cure Americas as written into the item by the city attorney. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
I'll move as written.
Thank you. Moved by Councilmember Caballero. We'll take that as a second. Councilmember Middleton, thank you. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Schul,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Caballero,
Aye.
Councilmember Freelon,
Aye.
Councilmember Freeman,
Abstain.
Councilmember Middleton, Councilmember Middleton.
Sorry, I vote aye. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
And Councilmember Reese.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The ayes have it, and the motion passes 6-0. Councilmember Middleton, thank you for hanging with us. We're sorry that you'll be having to preside over this funeral, but we're grateful to you for doing it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I carry with me your regards in the entire city. Thank you.
And we'll give you an excused absence for the rest of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Holly.
Colleagues, can I have a motion to give Councilmember Middleton an excused absence for the remainder of the meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Freeman, it's second by Councilmember Freelon. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Schul,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Caballero,
Aye.
Councilmember Freelon,
Aye.
Councilmember Freeman,
Aye.
Councilmember Middleton, Councilmember Reese.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The ayes have it. The motion passes 6-0. Thank you all. Colleagues, I see that there is someone here, Mr. Isaac Woods, who would like to speak on item 24. I did not pull item 24. I'm now going to pull item 24, which is the Newman Street Waterline Construction Contract Award. Okay, now we'll hear from Ms. Hillary Ensminger, who is here for public comment. Madam Clerk, can you make Ms. Ensminger available to be heard, please? Ms. Ensminger, thank you for being here. You have 3 minutes to address the council. We're glad to have you. Go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi. Sorry, I'm using assistive technology. So the first thing, hello, everybody. My name is Hillary Honig Ensminger. I'm here today to address a concern regarding, an item that I would like to be included in the 2021 budget, specifically addressing assistive technology of web and digital content for people with visual and other disabilities. Let me get my assistive technology going here. Sorry about that. Okay, here it is. I already said my name. Huh. Okay, hold on, let me go up. Okay, I've got to listen to my own notes because I get nervous and I don't talk in front of people.
HHE.
Okay.
Tell you a bit about myself.
All right. I've been a resident for over 47 years. I've been involved in the community.
One dedicated, active, and involved C1MM residential.
And I've been quite dedicated to the community at large, and I love Durham. I also happen to be blind as a result of a congenitive degenerative disease.
HHE. One dedicated, active, and involved C1MM. Lived here 47 years. Had first food truck in Durham /
I had probably the very first food truck in Durham in the 1980s before it was even permitted. So I started going before council back when I moved here in 1982 because we wanted to vend on the street and it was not permitted. So over the years, I've come before you guys. So here I'm trying to get here. I also have a seeing eye dog that allows me to peruse the streets of Durham and have a somewhat independent life.
Lastly, great dancer with AADE.
Lastly, I'm a great dancer and I've danced with AADE and, been involved in this community for a while. So going forward, for those of you who don't know, people with visual disabilities and other disabilities use a screen reader to access digital content. A screen reader is a form of assistive technology, and there are many versions of them. But what's most important is that the web content must be formatted properly in order for the screen reader to work properly.
An amazing form of assistive.
Let me see if I can skip ahead here.
Accessibility of web content levels the playing field.
Accessibility of web content levels the playing field for people who have differences. It also allows us to be included in, for example, if I was wanting to get a job in the city and work with the city sites, if I couldn't access the city sites, I couldn't work for the city and other digital content like PDF. So, trying to not skip around.
Beat for those who don't know.
Trying to get to my own notes. Okay, I got to the proper formatting.
Accessible content. The problem is. Digital content is and remains inaccessible.
Much of the digital content and web remains inaccessible in Durham. And I've been dealing with IT, very good. I won't get into names, but I've been dealing with it for about 15 years, and I've been screaming and yelling and screaming and yelling. I have gone through the regular channels. I think I've done my due diligence. I've been to the Mayor's Committee on Disability. I've been to IT, I've been to public affairs. And I've spoken with the city manager as of late, who is new to what's going on. And I have recently spoken with Steve Mearshul.
There is a federal mandate found in 800 Title
As you all probably know, there is a federal mandate that requires that municipalities provide accessible content on their webs. There's, you know, as there is for physical barriers. This is under Title I and II. It's not just municipalities, as you know, it also, it governs educational institutions and other entities.
required to provide accessible content. The problem is,
The real problem is
the problem has been addressed with IT. The problem
is that despite all my efforts, it remains inaccessible. So I wanted to get to the root of what I think could be done to fix it, and it will require some consideration in the budget.
At this time, Durham does not have a certified or qualified.
At this time, Durham does not have a certified or qualified single individual who is given the authority to write policy, enforce policy, and oversee the accessibility of web content, as well as design. We have a team, it's made up of different people, but none of them have all those credentials rolled into one, and they even admit it is difficult. Unlike General Services Department, where the ADA compliance officer oversees physical barriers, like ramps. This is my ramp, by the way. This is the ramp for those of us who are quadriplegics who need digital content or use Dragon. Without this ramp, we're not a part. So what I, after looking at it, there are several problems. One, the site is decentralized. There are about 110 webmasters who are posting. For all of them to know and understand ADA content, it's physically impossible. It's also physically impossible for public affairs to monitor it with a tool. This really requires somebody who has credentials. You would no more put a baker in to a building working with engineers to build, you know, structural elements, or a surgery on your toe be done by a dentist. So after speaking with Logan Small, who is in the general oversees ADA compliance, I mean, it's admitted they could use a project manager like they have for physical barriers, simply oversee content. It is a big job. And that person would work in conjunction, of course, with IT and public affairs. So that's what I'm proposing. I think it needs to be done because the fact is the city is in great part, has been for years, kind of non-compliant. And they're not being proactive, they're retroactive. So it's like going, if you have a wheelchair and you can't get up, you got to call the ADA compliance officer. I would be on the phone with Logan Small all day long.
Ms. Ensminger? Ms. Ensminger?
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. We really appreciate hearing from you. I know that the staff has sent a response, which is in our agenda. And you have spent a lot of time talking to our staff and including our discussion as well last week, a good long discussion. I will, as I said, be in touch with me in another week or so, and we'll talk again about this.
I have one last thing to say. After our discussion, I did speak with Katie directly and with everybody individually, and they all agreed they would, including, you know, it would be helpful to them as well.
Thank you, Ms. Ensminger.
That's what I have to say. Yeah, I just wanted you to know that it's not just me going, help, help, help.
We understand and we appreciate you.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, guys.
Appreciate you.
Okay.
Bye.
All right, colleagues. We're now going to move back to the items that the city manager needs for us to move on today, because they are grants that the airport needs to receive and it requires our action on a timely basis. The first one is item 44, creation and implementation of a program to support achieving item 45, U.S. Department of Transportation, Federal Aviation Administration Airport Coronavirus Response Grant Program. We would need to suspend the rules and vote on this item. Is there a motion to suspend?
And move we suspend the rules and vote.
Second.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Johnson, seconded by Councilmember Reese, that we suspend the rules and vote on this item, item 45. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Schul,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Caballero,
Aye.
Councilmember Freelon,
Aye.
Councilmember Freeman,
Aye.
Councilmember Middleton. Oh, sorry, Councilmember Reese.
Aye.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The ayes have it. The motion passes unanimously. And now we would need a motion to accept the Federal Aviation Administration Airport Coronavirus Release Grant and to authorize the city manager to execute the associated grant agreement.
So
So
moved.
moved. Second.
Moved by Councilmember Freeman, seconded by Councilmember Freelon. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Schul,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Caballero,
Aye.
Councilmember Freelon,
Aye.
Councilmember Freeman,
Aye.
Councilmember Reese.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The ayes have it. The motion passes unanimously. We'll now move to item 46, U.S. DOT Federal Aviation Administration Airport Coronavirus Response Grant Program Airport Concessions Addendum. We'll also need a motion to suspend the rules and vote on this item.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Freeman, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Johnson. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Schul,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Caballero,
Aye.
Councilmember Freelon,
Aye.
Councilmember Freeman,
Aye.
Councilmember Reese.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The ayes have it, and the motion passes unanimously. All right, colleagues, we'll now move to the pulled items, and we'll begin with item 11, Neighborhood Service Improvement NIS Lien Process Performance Audit. And that was pulled by Councilmember Reese. And I see Ms. Brewington is here. Ms. Brewington, you're not able to be heard.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Mayor Schul, Madam Mayor Pro Tem Johnson, council members, Madam Manager, Jermaine Brewington, Director of Audit Services.
Thank you, Dr. Brewington. Councilmember Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Dr. Brewington. Good to see you today. I'm sorry I was not at the Audit Services Committee meeting where this was discussed. Can you help me understand the actual problem with the foreclosure process that the audit identified? Because it read to me as though the problem was not enough foreclosures were being filed by the city. I don't think that can be right. So I'm hoping you can help me understand what I'm actually supposed to be reading in that report.
So there were a couple of issues, Councilman Reese. One, there was a shift in the responsibility of which department, whether it was the NIS or the finance department, which department would actually provide the list of items that would be sent to foreclosure. So that was one issue. And the finance department director, Mr. Boyd, made a decision back in 2020 that they would make that shift. And so part of the problem was that because there was no policy around determining the criteria for foreclosure, that took some time. So part of the issue was, or let me just say this, the reason the number of foreclosures dropped was twofold. One, prior to 2019, the finance department had the staff person that was working on that. That person transitioned from the city. Another person from the finance department took over, and they being finance, determined that they didn't really understand or think the criteria were sufficient. And so they started studying that. And so that was part of the reason that they were not sending any items to foreclosure, because they were developing a policy. And that policy was discussed in the report. And then the other issue was that there were no items being sent to foreclosure because of COVID, and the city manager's office suspended that. So there there are two prongs in this process. There's the lien process, which we thought was working well. And then there's the foreclosure process, which simply was the criteria was not in place to determine which properties should be sent to foreclosure.
So foreclosure is what happens after the lien is insufficient to generate funds to cover the fines and fees. Is that right?
Yes, that's the collection piece of that process. Yes.
Okay. Generally what happens is a lien is filed. In order to remove the lien, the property owner then pays whatever fees or fines have been assessed, and then the lien is removed.
Exactly.
And when the property owner doesn't do that, then a foreclosure process is initiated.
Exactly. Yes.
And is it the case when a foreclosure process is initiated, would the city ever recall that process if the fines and fees were taken care of by the property owner prior to it's kind of consummation of the foreclosure itself?
I think the answer to that question is yes, but David Boyd is also present at this meeting and he could probably confirm that, but I think the answer to that is yes.
Okay.
Because you're saying if the owner comes back and then says, hey, I have the funds, I really, I want to pay all the fees, can we take that property out of foreclosure? And I think the answer to that question is yes.
It looks like someone from finance has popped up.
Hi, Emily Desiderio, Deputy Finance Director. The answer to that question is yes, we can pull it back if the property owner does end up paying it.
Is that what usually happens, or does it usually just go to foreclosure? And
we've seen kind of a split in cases. So we've had a handful of cases where the property owner comes forward and pays the fees, and then we essentially pull back the foreclosure. But we have seen it.
And if I understood correctly, something on the order of 264,000, I think was the number, in fees and fines related to these sorts of violations, NIS violations, have been rendered uncollectible because the statute of limitations on them has passed. Is that right?
That is correct, yes.
And that's because we didn't file foreclosures on people. And so they didn't have that last little prod to get them to pay. We just didn't do anything, and the statute of limitations passed, and so we couldn't file foreclosure again.
Exactly.
Okay. And is the policy remedy here to file more foreclosures?
I don't think the policy remedy is to file more foreclosures. I think the policy remedy is to determine what criteria should be standardized so that they can file the foreclosures timely.
Okay, I see lots of other people have popped up to try to answer my annoying questions, so this would be a good time for someone to do that.
Mr. Boyd or Manager Page, whoever wants to get started.
I will start very, very briefly. Certainly there are some criteria that, would make one of these cases, be a good case to foreclose on. And then there's criteria that would make it be not a good case at all. I think Dr. Brewington has brought some information forward about during the pandemic. Certain case, it would not be a policy decision of ours if we have these cases that are 10 years. Oh, that's how long the statute is. It's it's an extended period of time. So certainly during a pandemic, we would not be, foreclosing on residents who were, properties where there were people living in, just as we have minimized other policy, implemented other policy decisions that minimize people becoming without a residence during, during COVID. So before Mr. Boyd speaks, I did want to bring that point forward because, the statute is a really long time, and only certain of those cases are running out of statute, and others have statute left. So, and Mr. Boyd might want to speak as well.
David Boyd, Finance Director. Foreclosure is one of the collection tools that we have, but it is not always the appropriate tool to collect on outstanding NIS liens. Could be that the amount owed is more than the property is worth. It could be that the attorney's fees exceed the amount that is owed, or it could be that there is really not a material amount that is owed on the individual lien and foreclosing on someone's property because they owe $250 on an NIS lien is not viewed as an appropriate collection tool based on the amount that's owed. So while there was in this particular period that Dr. Brewington's staff looked at $260,000 worth of items that went past the statute of limitations, I don't think it's appropriate to say that all of them would have been remedied by use of a foreclosure tool. Success going forward is to make sure that we have criteria that is defensible, appropriate, and consistent that we can apply, and that everyone agrees is the right way to evaluate when we should and should not use that tool, and to make sure we've got that in place and we execute it consistently.
I just want to thank everybody on staff who's come on to help me understand this process. I think, David, the piece that you just said really closed the loop for me on that. I guess I read the report, and it definitely struck a nerve because it really seemed like the gist of the report was the city wasn't foreclosing on enough people, and we lost some money because of it. I think now that I've heard a broader range of kind of explanations about what's happening here, David, especially what you said about this is just one tool and it might not be appropriate in all cases, I guess I'm a little more comfortable with that. I guess the other thing I just wanted to say is that I guess this is the first time I've ever come face to face with the fact that that when NIS takes an enforcement action that has a financial cost associated with it, that really the biggest teeth that we have in the process, ultimately at the end of a long line, is foreclosure. And that was a sobering moment for me. And I appreciate all the care with which folks have talked about it today, the care with which we have used that process, and will continue to use it in the future. But it's just something I had not been exposed to yet. So that's all I had to say about that, except now Ms. Gardner's online and might want to add to the conversation. But I think I have what I needed from the item. But I'm happy to hear more. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You, Councilmember. Ms. Gardner, welcome.
Hi, Faith Gardner, Assistant Director, Neighborhood Improvement Services. Just wanted to add that, you know, we have had a effective collaboration with the Finance Department in past years, and you know, criteria in place, though not codified in a policy way. I did want to add that in the past, and I'm suspecting in the future with the future policy, we do not foreclose on low-income property owners who are living in their homes. So that would be an additional criteria that the policy would not seem appropriate to foreclose on those folks. So just wanted to add that in the mix in case anyone was concerned.
That helps a lot, Faith. Thanks a lot. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Dr. Brewington.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember, I had some of the same questions, and I had written Mr. Boyd an email, which he responded to with some comments from Ms. Desiderio. I probably should have forwarded them to all of you. I didn't, but I just forwarded them just now. So that might ask, I think that those were the points they covered, but at least you have it in writing now also. So thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor, if I had reviewed this agenda item before 12:30 at night last night, I might have done the same. So appreciate you taking that step. Thanks.
Well, it's a long agenda. I give us all A's for getting through it. Councilmember Freeman.
My mouse disappeared, sorry. I was just going to note, I appreciate Councilmember Reese highlighting this. I do appreciate the opportunity to hear from NIS on a bi-monthly basis for Northeast Central Durham, specifically around this, which is why I could see how some of the procedures are in place. But I did want to just note that there are some sections of Durham that might need a closer look, like Southeast Durham, well, mainly South Side, and down 98, just acknowledging that these are the places where we're seeing the highest rates of growth and development in a way that mirrors gentrification. And so just noting those few things for my council, I again offer the Northeast Central Durham subcommittee as a space to kind of explore some of this conversation, because I do believe that the foreclosure pause was due to the staff leaving, but I think it kind of served a dual purpose and giving us a chance to not foreclose on some of the properties, but it also made it very lucrative for folks to just pay taxes off and purchase houses. And I am noticing that in my own neighborhood. I just want to make sure I point that out. You gave me the opportunity to do that. And so thank you, Councilmember Reese.
Thank you very much, Council Member. Are there any further questions from Dr. Brewington? Thank you, Dr. Brewington. We appreciate you being with us.
Thank you.
Colleagues, we'll now move to our next pulled item, which is item 16, and this is an item that was pulled by Councilmember Reese.
Hello, Mr. Johnson. How are you today?
Greetings, Councilmember Reginald Johnson, Director, Department of Community Development.
Thanks, Reginald. Thanks for being with us. Why is it taking so long for these two contracts to get to us?
Well, actually, Councilmember, it's a great question. This is actually a set of 6. There's 6 different services under the LED program, and we've actually had to, for some of the procurements, go out again, and for a second time on some of them. And so all of them need to be rolled out at the same time. So now we are reaching out the point where we can roll the entire program out with all of the different components to it. You actually have a couple of more contracts, agenda items on your next agenda cycle.
Great. That had been my assumption. I just wanted to ask about that and say, when do we expect kind of the marketing and intake to begin in earnest assuming we approve these 2 items?
Well, let me, Councilmember, ask our project manager, Ms. Nisha Reynolds, to answer that question in terms of when the marketing and outreach is expected to begin. She's on the line, but like I said, we have a couple of more contracts that have to come before you for your approval before all of the programs are completed and we're ready to go. It's a very complex grant that I would add. Ms. Reynolds.
Good afternoon. This is Nisha Reynolds with the Community Development Department. In response to your question, our vendors who have been awarded contract are ready to go as soon as we are. So upon execution, they're ready to begin application intake and marketing and outreach program. They're already actively engaged in this work, and they will be expanding, their current portfolio to accommodate our program.
That's fantastic. I really appreciate the answers to these questions. Also appreciate the unfortunate way that this has had to be delayed in many ways, because I think there's really only one vendor who's well situated to do it. And so I understand there are certain federal regulations where if you get one response, you have to go back to the market again. And that has had the unfortunate impact of delaying what I think is a much needed program in the community. So thank you both for your work in trying to get us up to the starting line of deploying these resources in this important lead reduction program into the community, and look forward to seeing that happen real soon. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Council Member. Are there any more questions for Mr. Johnson? All right, great. Thank you very much. And now we'll move on to item 24. Madam Clerk, Isaac Woods is here to comment on item 24. This is the Newman Street Waterline Award of Construction Contract to Access Utility. I see Mr. Greeley here. Mr. Greeley, why don't we hear from Mr. Woods, and then you may have some comments.
Sure.
Mr. Woods, welcome. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and Pro Tem and council members. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. As I stated before, this is really deals with 2 items. I think this other item is Mr. Jordan is going to speak to you in regards to the local ordinance on the petition process. So I'm going to in essence of time, which I hope you appreciate, I'm going to address both of them in my limited time on behalf of myself and the other property owners on Ardmore Drive that doesn't have water or city water or street paving. We're glad to see the city recognize and approve the essential water service to the Newman Street to meet the fire demands in the area and provide water service to 208 and 210 Newman Street. We're so excited about that because, as the mayor and council is well aware, part of Ardmore Drive petition has the same issue: no water to meet the fire demands, no water service to part of the properties on Ardmore Drive. Therefore, we look forward to the mayor pro tem, and the council reconsidering the lack of fire service to areas of Ardmore Drive and the lack of city water service and street paving to all the property owners on Ardmore Drive. We all are in the city, and we do not need to promote disparities between people, particularly on the same road. Ardmore Drive property owners have been in the city limits and paying property taxes for forced annexation for over 40 years. That's 4 decades. We thank you for your time and consideration, and we ask that, as you did with the Newman Street, that you consider that we have a lack of fire demands, which I reported to you earlier. We have had houses on the street burned down, and your fire chief said they cannot save our houses if they catch on fire, which is a sad story to lose one already. So we ask you to consider our fire protection, our water and street paving for everybody on Ardmore Drive. We appreciate your time on behalf of all the property owners on Ardmore Drive. Thank you very much, Council.
Thank you very much, Mr. Woods. We appreciate you being here with us. Mr. Greeley, would you like to comment?
Certainly. Don Greeley, Department of Water Management. Good afternoon, Mayor Schulmaker, Mayor Pro Tem Johnson, and members of council. I just wanted to clarify, this is a slightly different situation than what exists on Ardmore. The Newman Street water line is an early out project as part of the East Durham, the Greater East Durham project. The Greater East Durham project is an area of the city bounded by Taylor Street to the north, Fayetteville to the west, Alston to the east, and Linwood to the south. We're replacing or upsizing all of the water and sewer lines in that area in East Durham. It was identified early on that there needed to be there was a gap in the water system between Ramsar and East Main along Fayetteville. As you can see from the attached map in the agenda item, Newman Street parallels Fayetteville, and they're actually in the same right of way. So we needed to close that gap to support and improve the overall fire flow and service delivery to the greater downtown area and the growth that we're seeing there. So we needed to close that gap. We weren't really looking forward to having to tear up Fayetteville Street. But there was also there used to be an older 2-inch water line that went down Newman Street that actually provided water service to both of those properties. That water line has caused us numerous problems with breaking, and ultimately when those structures were torn down at those two addresses, 208 and 210, we actually just turned the water off so that line wouldn't leak anymore. So the decision was mostly to move the modeling showed that we could move the water line out of Fayetteville's and put it into Newman Street to avoid having to tear up Fayetteville Street, which of course is a major thoroughfare in Durham, but it also reestablished the previous service that was there that we're obligated to reestablish at those two locations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Greeley, and I appreciated that you all did take the time when I was reading the item to try not to disrupt the Fayetteville Street traffic. I think that was great and very creative. I know Mr. Woods is in touch with our staff on numerous occasions, and we appreciate him being here today as well. Councilmember Freeman.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I just wanted to speak to Mr. Woods and say I completely understand why you would try to use the opportunity to highlight the parallels in this case to your situation on Ardmore Drive. And I would say that I would be willing to bring it back forward to reconsider if the votes were on council. I don't believe that they are. And I continue to support you in continuing to bring this forward because I think it's a travesty that you don't have the water in place, and it's been over 40 years. So, thank you. I want to thank you for being here.
Thank you, council member. All right, colleagues. Thank you, Mr. Greeley. We're now going to move on to item 29. This is an item that I pulled. This is the resolution approving the application of the Local Government Commission for the issue of water and sewer bonds, revenue bonds. And I see Ms. Desiderio. The first thing I want to say is that this is one of those items that goes by, you know, we put it on consent and we barely give it a thought, and it's $300 million of refinancing. So I thought maybe we should at least notice it. That's the first thing. But also, I have a question, which is, why do we use the bands, I'm not sure how we pronounce that, for the first 3 years? What is the advantage of that interest-only financing up front? Why don't we go, you know, on a financing of this size, why don't we go to just the, you know, the financing that we're doing now?
So Emily Desiderio, Deputy Finance Director. The main reason why we do a ban is to match our spending with our borrowing. So we're not borrowing too prematurely and paying all the debt service up front. So by doing this interest only, we're essentially just paying for what we're using. So it better aligns our spending with our borrowing.
Got you. So when is the decision point that you do the kind of financing we're doing now? What makes your mind up?
It's basically the timing of when we think the spending is going to occur. So our goal is to kind of align the spending with the borrowing, and with the projects that are in the capital plan for water and sewer. This was the best option. Great.
And is there some threshold for that? You know, what I guess I don't understand is at the beginning, does that mean for the interest-only financing, we're just not spending very much during that period? And then when we need to spend a whole bunch, that's when is there some threshold that we reach?
There's really no threshold other than it's just a combination of a lot of different projects. So as we start to spend it down over the 3 years, we're better able to align it with with the spending with the borrowing. So there's not really a threshold with it. It's more of just so we don't have to borrow a bunch of money up front and then not spend it as quickly as we had originally thought we would.
Thank you. And I do want to notice also and appreciate the inclusion of Loop Capital and the effort to ensure significant minority participation in the financing work. Thank you for that. Any questions, any other questions, colleagues, on this item? Thank you. We'll now move to our last pull item, which is item 33. This item is contract ST317C utility locate services, and I cannot remember who pulled this item, but I bet you it's Councilmember Reese.
That would be me. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Go for it.
Hi, Ms. Johnson. How are you today?
Good afternoon.
Can you tell me, this isn't the first one of these contracts we've done, is it?
No, sir, it is not.
Okay, is this a new vendor to perform this service for us, or is this additional utility locate services in addition to some other contract that already exists?
So good afternoon to everyone. Tasha Johnson, Public Works Assistant Director. This is the same vendor that we've used previously. We re-advertised the contract with new funds allocated this current fiscal year, FY21. And this is the third, I believe, contract that we've done professional services for locating.
So we must like this vendor okay, since we're re-upping with them again.
There are not a lot of vendors in the market that have bid on this work.
Fair enough. Do we think that utility locate services are going okay in Durham right now? And I ask because within the last couple of years, we've had a couple of pretty spectacular incidents in which certain utilities were not, or were somehow not identified, and gas breaches have occurred. And when I saw utility locate on the agenda, I really wanted to find out, are we switching vendors for some reason, number one? But number two, kind of get your sense of if you think that service is going okay right now.
This particular contract and the city itself is responsible for locating the city's utilities. So that's water, sewer, and stormwater. And so in that regard, I think we're doing okay. The other utilities are responsible for locating their own infrastructure.
That's the piece that I forgot. That's exactly right. Thank you, Ms. Johnson. I appreciate that. I didn't have any other questions, but since I've got you here from Public Works, let me just say that I'm really excited about that septic to sewer pilot program. It's the kind of program that is never going to get a lot of press, but I think it can make a huge difference in improving water quality, and the dollar cost isn't that extreme. The more homes we can get on sewer and off of septic, the better our water quality will be. And I just want to thank you and your department for being so innovative to get that off the ground. I look forward to seeing the results in that. So that's all I had. Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. I really like your background. And Councilmember Reese, thank you for those questions. We have 3 items that are presentation items. Items 28, item 30, and item 38. That would be item 28 is the third quarter financial report. Item 30 is the development agreement with Lambert Development Hunt Street LLC. And item 38 is the Greater Triangle Commuter Rail Study update. I'm going to ask the manager, Madam Manager, I will go through these as they're numbered unless you have any reason to want to prioritize any of them for this afternoon.
Mr. Mayor, I did not receive information from staff that would take them out of the order on the agenda, so I suggest we go with the order in the agenda.
Thank you, Madam Manager. So that means we'll begin with item 28, which is the FY 2021 third quarter financial report. And I see Mr. Boyd here with us. Welcome, Mr. Boyd.
Thank you. Good afternoon again. David Boyd, Finance Director. I'll be joined by John Allure if there are questions that I cannot answer, and we'll go through the results through the third quarter, starting first with the general fund, where I think the takeaway here is general fund is doing better than we had expected when we came into the year, and better than what we had told you after the second quarter. I think that if you take nothing else away from today, that's the message. Next slide, please. And then just looking at departmental spending, you can see all the departments in good shape. If you go to the next slide, please, you can see the biggest positive variance is, as you might expect, in Parks and Rec. Obviously, the most impacted by the pandemic and so many services and programs that just didn't happen this year. Next slide, please. And then you can see, looking at it, expenditures in the general fund, different way. Again, the biggest amount of savings on the personnel side. Overall, we're projecting total spending in the general fund to be under budget by just over $5 million. Next slide. And that's what I had just told you. Next slide. On the revenue side, again, going into fiscal year 21, lots of uncertainty. Want to make sure we were conservative, but the potential for lower collection rates on property tax does not seem to have materialized. So we've got positive expectations on collections there by the end of the year. And then most markedly on the sales tax side, spending did not fall off as we thought perhaps would happen. A $10 million projected positive variance on the revenue side. And then, on the negative side, not surprising, occupancy tax, and then charges for services, many of those again on the Parks and Rec programmatic side. So a $10.5 million positive variance on revenues, combine that with a $500,000 or a $5 million positive variance on spending, total $15 million positive variance compared to budget for the general fund. Next slide. Property taxes, as I said, there was some thought that perhaps collection rates would decline. We have not seen that. Next slide. And again, sales taxes far above where we had ever hoped they might be going into the pandemic. Next slide is a recap of what I just went over, and then the next slide kind of just shows you that overall this time compared to this time last year, we have more total revenue collected this year than we did last year at this time. Next slide. Fund balance for the general fund compared to our policy requirements. Current projections are that we'll be $23.6 million above our 16.7% target level. That number is about $7 million higher than when you saw these numbers in the second quarter. Questions on the general fund before I move on to the enterprise funds?
Colleagues, I can't see all of you all on my screen. So if you have...
I'll just wait till the end, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Boyd.
Sorry. Enterprise funds, starting first with the water and sewer fund. Operating revenues, rate revenues from customers is tracking right along as projected. We did not budget, a COVID decline in water revenues, and we're tracking very close to budget. So on the revenue side, we're looking good. Next slide. On the spending side of water, the biggest variance there is related to debt service, and that has a bit to do with what we just talked about on what will be the city's largest ever single bond issuance. Is that we had projected perhaps taking out that line of credit, that ban in this fiscal year, and because that won't actually happen until fiscal year 22, you'll all be approving it this year, but we won't be closing on it until fiscal year 22. We've got a positive variance on the debt service on the expenditure side, which is where most of the savings budgetarily is coming from in the water and sewer fund. Pardon me. Next slide is a recap of the charts we just went over. On the next slide, in one of those areas that's not going well and is not improving is transit. It's not getting any worse. It's just related to the suspension of fares compared to the expectation that we would have fare revenue this year, offset a bit by the large influx of federal dollars that we got this year, but then again offset by a reduction in state grant dollars that we're not getting this year. And then if you switch over to the spending side, we're not really projecting to save any money because we've gone forward with some spending on fleet replacement that had been deferred, and that's where much of that grant money went this year was to replace our aging fleet. Some of those shiny new electric buses that you all have seen this year, that's part of that effort. Next slide. And the next one after that. Solid waste has been operationally affected by the pandemic. With the transportation being closed for a number of months, we've got lower operating revenues. And then next slide on the spending side, the folks up there have had to deal with, shuffling personnel and trying to deal with limited number of people in trucks and running extra routes and those types of things has resulted in us probably spending more in overtime than we otherwise would have in dealing with personnel costs. So slight negative budget variance in solid waste fund, but not nearly as bad as it might have been. Next slide is a recap of the solid waste fund. Moving on to the parking fund, which has probably been the most impacted by just a complete drop off in parking demand, not improving, more than $3 million negative implications on our revenues. On the spending side, we have been able to save some money on operations because of that. But overall, a $2.3 million negative variance overall in the parking fund. We may be able to use some of the new rescue plan money for revenue offsets in parking. That's one of the things that's being evaluated as to whether or not that's viable or not. And then the last slide, skip 2 there, Diana, to the last slide. The other funds, obviously the ballpark and the DPAC operations have been significantly impacted. I was able to get out and go to a baseball game last night. Hopefully some of you have been able to experience some degree of normalcy. So I was there. They're playing ball again, but revenue sharing from both ballpark and DPAC, non-existent due to the closures last year. Building is still continuing, so the inspections revenues continue to exceed what could have been, and then the stormwater fund not really impacted by pandemic-related things, just based on the way that those fees are collected. That positive variance there has been considered in the keeping user rates low as we move forward. That's my report. Happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Boyd. I have one question, and I'm sure my colleagues do as well. First of all, what a relatively happy report. The fact that our revenue has maintained itself is, I think, a big surprise to everybody. And now here in this next quarterly report, we see even more. We're using, and so I'm trying to remember, and it may be that I have to wait until our budget sessions next week, but the fund balance surplus over the 16.7% is, I believe, is at $23 million, roughly thereabouts, but that's the expectation. And is that when we were making the budget for next year and deciding upon uses of the fund balance, was that the number we had in mind at the time?
John Laura, interim budget director. Yes, that's correct. So what was proposed on Monday was then using $10.4 million of that available.
Okay.
Above the 16.7 threshold.
Thank you, Mr. Allure. That's what I wanted to know. I appreciate it. And then on the parking, I was a little confused about the parking revenue, transit operations. I'm sorry, not parking, transit operation funds revenue. This would be, not sure the slide number there, but of course, the operating revenues were way down. The taxes were, the grant revenue, I'm trying to understand how I thought that the grant revenue was going to end up giving us a positive variance here, and I'm confused about how.
Yeah, sure. So our conversation early in the year, Mr. Mayor, was that we had included that $12.2 million CARES grant revenue in there before we had actually included it in the budget. So there was early reports had a $12 million positive variance on revenues solely attributed to that grant. So during the year, we brought forward a budget amendment to include that revenue. So now you're not seeing a variance there, but that revenue is shown and will be collected. So that's why you saw something confusing before. We fixed it, and now you're recalling where it was before, but now we corrected it so that doesn't show this big $12 million variance throughout the whole year.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Boyd. And just big congratulations to all of our departments and everybody for weathering this storm as well as we have. Colleagues, questions for Mr. Boyd or Mr. Allure? Anyone? All righty. Thank you very much. We really appreciate the report. I'm glad we're where we are, and I think if we'd, I don't know about you all, I'd be curious to ask you in private, but 6 or 9 months ago, I don't think any of us thought we'd be here. So good thing.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, colleagues. We're now at item 30, the next presentation. And hang on one second, I'll get it together. This is the development agreement with Lambert Development Hunt Street 2 LLC. Ms. Parrish, are you here to introduce this item to us?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem and council members. I am Robin Parrish from General Services Department, Real Estate Division. Our presentation will be given by Ben Kuhn and Jeremy Anderson, representing the developer, Lambert Development. And at this time, I'll turn the floor over to Mr. Kuhn and Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Ms. Parrish. Colleagues, before we get started, we don't usually have these kinds of presentations, but the manager, from private developers, but the manager, given the nature of this and the fact that it involves easements essentially a deal with the city, thought it would be wise for us to hear this at this point. So I'm going to, Mr. Kuhn, welcome. We're glad to have you. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mayor Schul, Mayor Pro Tem, fellow council members. Yes, my name is Ben Kuhn, and I'm here on behalf of Lambert Development, Hunt Street 2 LLC, and Henry Lambert. And together with me today is Jeremy Anderson with the Coulter Jewell firm here, there in Durham. We both worked with Lambert Development and obviously the folks with the city of Durham, various stakeholders, parties with respect to the development agreement, the proposed improvements regarding the development agreement, as well as the easements that are at issue in this matter. I would like to start, I think, today with just basic background information on the project and the existing site conditions, which some of you will know about, and then move real quickly into the basic request before you in connection with the development agreement and the easement agreements that are being requested. So we move forward with respect to the project location to give you a little bit of the sense of the surroundings. Apologies. It's the Vega site is at 214 Hunt Street, as it is the site of the former Vega Metals building located at the northwest corner of Hunt Street and Rigsby Avenue, obviously on the north side of downtown Durham, and located in the southeastern corner of the Durham Central Park property. As you can see from the aerial here, there's several residential projects around the park area, including Foster on the Park, Liberty Warehouse, and the Brandon being a prior project by this developer, Lambert Development and Henry Lambert, that was built, I believe, finished in 2 years ago or so, 2 or 3 years ago, and is now fully occupied. And so the Durham, the Vega Metal site is about a 6.6 acre property. The old building you see there, the former Vega Metals building, has been demolished, and back in about, last year. And so right now it's a vacant lot. It is currently, I believe, in the process of remediation with respect to, it's a brownfield property. So the property is being cleaned up and being prepared to be utilized for future development, which you'll see here in a moment. And so it's obvious from the area with this, the development team that's included, of course, is Lambert Development. You have MHA Works there doing the architect work, CJT doing the civil engineering and landscaping, and our general contractor is Resolute Building Company. So that's part of our development team. And so if we move forward on the slides. So that's basic background on just the site and what's around it. We'll get into a little bit more discussion on that later. This is the basic easement request that you have before you in the next 2 slides. The building, as you'll see, is outlined shaded in gray. And then there are 2 easements shown here that are needed. These are primarily for construction of the building. One is the area shaded in red. There's two areas shaded in red. Those are approximately 8.5 feet wide by, looks like, I think it's about 140 to 150 feet long, about 2,160 square feet total that are needed for fire separation, building separation, maintenance purposes for the side of the building that's to be constructed on the Vega Metals property. The blue shaded area is the temporary construction easements that will be required for the period of time that the building is being constructed. And obviously the temporary construction easement, once construction is over, would terminate and cease. Then the second set of easements are the easement requests that are required for the improvements to the park that the developer will be undertaking consistent with the terms of the development agreement. You'll see along Rigsby, going in a vertical fashion, the area where the skate park improvements, the temporary construction easements are going to be needed for the skate park improvements. And then to the west, on the western side, is the area that's being known or referred to as the overlook area. That's required for various improvements that are going to be known as the overlook area, which you'll see in a moment. So that's where, those are the basic elements of the easement. You'll see some of the existing conditions of the property here on this slide. You'll see in the middle is an area just to the west of Rigsby along that sidewalk where you have a denuded area of the slope that goes down towards the skate park. That is obviously it is not a condition that hopefully we would want. The improvements will include that. You see the existing Durham Central Park stormwater devices. There's two of them. One there, SEM1, Stormwater Control Measure 1, and the area of the other one is Stormwater Control Measure 2 near the overlook area. All of those areas are going to be improved with the developer improvements that are being made to the park. And so the overlook area will also incorporate a formal access, ADA accessible access from Hunt Street into the park as well. The next slide, please. Yes. And so you see here the area of the existing skate park showing Rigsby and the denuded slope existing conditions. You see that there is really no area of refuge of comfort. There is a bench there. It looks like there's two people sitting there, and an area that otherwise it could be better well landscaped and hardscaped, which is what the improvements will bring to this area, and will also provide some respite and resting areas for people. So those are the easements in general. The proposed development that is would be located on the Vega Metal site is a 7-story mixed-use building. It has 2 stories of parking tucked into a gentle slope in the property, together with some retail and office space. It would have 57 residential units, approximately 5,672 square feet of commercial space. The retail would face the park and Hunt Street. Has plenty enough parking for the users of the condominium buildings, as well as some retail and the office space that's also in the building. We anticipate an 18-month construction timeline. We expect and hope to start construction in June. This development agreement is one of the last elements we need to put in place to be able to get our permits finalized and to proceed and break ground with respect to construction of the project, but also immediately with construction of the skate park improvements and some of the other improvements to the park. This is, again, as I said, a brownfield redevelopment project being administered by the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality to make sure that the environmental hazards that were present on the site are cleaned up in a way that's required pursuant to DENR regulations. We estimate that there's 450 construction jobs that will be created by this project. And obviously, once it's completed, there will be a substantial increase in the tax base by the improvements on the property, but also we believe community improvements to the park. We believe there'll be substantial community improvements to the park in terms of aesthetic value rest and respite areas, other ways to activate park uses. And otherwise, we have talked with our general contractor, Resolute, who has indicated they have a 10 to 15% MBE participation commitment with respect to construction jobs with their projects. Next slide, please. And if there's anything that comes up while I'm making my presentation, please don't hesitate to interject and ask any questions if you'd like to direct any of the conversation to any concerns or issues that raise. This next slide is a little bit more
those comments till the end of your presentation, Mr. Cooper.
Thank you. The next slide gets into some of the more particulars of the location and the design elements of both the overlook area as well as the skate park. You'll see to the left, the overlook is on the western side of the building, and on the north side portion that faces the park and the stormwater facility. Those design elements are a result of design charrettes with Durham Central Park and Durham Parks and Recreation. There were meetings with stakeholders in that area that included obviously folks with the city of Raleigh, city of Durham, apologize for that. General Services, the attorney's office. We've worked with people there, Robin Parrish, of course, Donna O'Toole, Stacy Poston, and others with the city of Durham. We worked with the General Services Office, DRP, and others. We've worked and activated the community with respect to this project, including the neighborhoods and residents, park patrons, Durham Central Park, Inc., who has been involved in the design charrettes. And we've worked closely with representatives of the skateboard community, who are active, obviously, users of this skate park, which is the only skate park in the city of Durham park system, I believe. So we've done everything we think reasonably we could to try to activate people, take input in terms of the design that they felt was going to be helpful for the way they use the park, and for ways that we can improve the park property so that it makes it more inviting, not just to people who will be living nearby, but also people who will be coming to the city or living around in the community and be able to access the parks through the better access that's being provided by some of the park improvements that we're making. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we felt it was very important to initiate this with a collaborative approach. And I know Jeremy was involved early on in this process, which started 2 years ago in engaging the community in 2018, in fact, where the development team held meetings and discussed with stakeholders these various elements of the park improvements. Durham Central Park and an appointed task force, the Durham Parks and Recreation Department, General Services, skate park users, neighbors, and adjacent property owners. So we felt like we got really good impact. We were able to tweak some of the design in ways that we think make it a better project for the park, but also for the developer as well, in terms of just basically blending into the park to the extent we possibly can, which is what our goal is to do. The site plan has been approved. We received a variance that was approved by the Board of Adjustment. And so we have gone through the administrative process of getting the various approvals. And so we're seeking the request for the approval of the various easements that have been shown to you, which we think are fairly minimal easements with respect to literally a 8.5 foot sliver of property, Durham property, park property that's adjacent to certain portions of the building. These park improvements are ones that have been deemed to be consistent with the Unified Development Ordinance, and they're consistent with the DCP master plan. It completes 2 of the 13 DCP master plan elements. So we believe we're plugging policies that policymakers have viewed as important and critical for this park, and we're plugging them right into this project and into this development agreement. There are various, the benefits of the, we can go to the benefits and the financial benefits slide that we have, which I think is important to lay out. The value the developer offers to the city include a housing fund donation of $1,000 per unit for the property, which will be $57,000 to the city's housing fund, affordable housing fund. The developer is undertaking at its expense the cost of the skate park improvements, which is approximately $67,000, together in addition with the cost of the overlook area improvements, which is approximately $100,000. And we are paying for stormwater facility usage on the park property during design and construction. And with the interest from funds that are being escrowed by the developer into the city's escrow accounts, we estimate that approximately $24,000 of interest would accrue, which is being allocated to the city, which comes up to a value, total value, gross value offered to the city pursuant to this development agreement, approximately $295,000. The value of the easements that the city is providing, there's the 3 easements basically, the 2 fire separation easements and the various temporary construction easements based on appraisal information that we provided to the city, and the city staff used to evaluate the value of the easements, came up with a value of $145,000 and change, which when you net that out, there's a net value of financial gain benefit to the city of approximately $150,000, which we think is a good benefit to the city, not only financially, but with respect to the improvements to the park, the value for the skating community that's going to be realized, the additional tax base, and the jobs that are going to be created, and the additional community that's going to be created around the park property, which we think is obviously, there's people, as you look at the first slide that we presented, there's obviously a very strong community around the park, and that's what this is helping, we believe, to continue to build on. And for that, we obviously would answer any questions you have or any information that you would like to further consider the issues that are before you on this. And I will stop and take your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kuhn. And if the slideshow could come down, that would be great. Thank you. Jared Martinson has signed up to speak on this item. Mr. Martinson, are you available to be heard?
Mr. Mayor, this is Jeremy Anderson with CJT. He's the architect with the development team, and he was here just to answer any questions.
Got you. Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Thank you. All right. I'll start with a question. Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Kuhn, and we appreciate the offers that you've made to support the improvement of the stormwater as well as the skate park, and they are certainly have value. What will these be apartments or condominiums? You probably told me and I can't remember.
There are going to be 57 condominiums, yes.
Right. What will the sales price be for these condominiums?
I believe they will be going for north of $600,000.
Okay. This is not a rezoning. We have no, we don't have to be concerned about this is a business deal. Where the city has interests here that we are, and you all have interests. You want the easements, and we're essentially selling them to you. And so I'll just say for myself that having thought about this a lot, and especially hearing the value of those condominiums, I'll just say that the affordable housing contribution is significantly under what I think would be acceptable. I have a number in mind that I do think is acceptable. I think $1,000 a unit on a $600,000 unit is way too little. And so I think that what seems fair to me would be approximately $5,000 a unit. So that would be, I guess, a $285,000 profit to the Affordable Housing Fund. I think that would be much more in line with what I think is fair in this situation. So I just put that out there.
I appreciate that. We're willing to discuss that. And I'm happy to talk to Henry Lambert about that and how we respond to that. I think I would point out that it's other projects have, and I understand that this is a business deal, and we're willing to work with the city and on this. Is this something that we can get back to you in the next couple of days and discuss?
Yeah, of course. We're not voting on this until 10 days from now.
Sure.
And so, of course, that I'm putting out what to me seems like that's a bottom line for me. I'll just say that. Other questions, colleagues, and comments? Councilmember Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just wanted to point out it's actually 2.5 weeks. We have an extra week in between this work session and our next Monday.
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Keene, thank you for your presentation. I have a couple of questions about the temporary easements, but my biggest question is about the permanent easements. I guess the gentlest way I can ask this is, why in the world did you design this building to need more land than you bought? Why are you coming to us for this? I just don't understand that. Help me figure out why we're having the conversation about you needing more land to build these condos than you bought on this property.
Well, and Jamie, if you want to help out, look on that issue, but the building itself is located on the property. And there's simply building code requirements that require buildings to be separated. It's as if you would be building another 5-story building on the city park property at this location. And my sense is that's not part of the park development plan. So it's merely area that is reserved for not to be developed. We're not putting any part of the building that's being developed on park property. We're in fact building improvements on the park property that are value to the city. It's not any part of the building that's going onto the park property at all.
Yeah, I got that. I can read the map. I appreciate that. The question though is, did this rule get sprung on you after you designed the building and you're like, oh my gosh, we built to the edge of this property and now we need another 8 feet. We got to go buy this easement. Or was this kind of the plan all along, was to build up to the property line and then know that you were going to come to the city and ask for 8 feet of our property permanently?
And I'll address that if you want me to take that. Jeremy Anderson with CJT. Thanks, Councilman Reese, for the question. It's the fire separation easement is, as Ben said, a building code issue. In order to have glazing, and glazing that would be something aesthetic to the side of the building, both portions where we have that easement requirement, we need assurance that there wouldn't be a building built within 10 feet, or essentially we couldn't have any glazing on that side of the building. So you either request, and it's not, we requested the same on Foster on the park. I can't recall if the Brandon did, but in order to have residential units and that ground floor commercial with the amount of glazing that is attributable to a building like this, you need to have an assurance put in place that there couldn't be anything built within 10 feet. So you either have the 10-foot separation to get the glazing, or you end up with a building facade that has no windows on it. So that's what it's for.
And Jeremy, correct me if I'm wrong. The site plan was submitted and reviewed by the city and approved by the city, correct?
That's correct.
With the applicable setbacks for the city of Durham, correct?
That's correct. Not really any setbacks. I mean, I think Councilman Reese, you understand downtown development is encourages to maximize the parcel. So to set back 10 feet from either corner actually makes it tough to meet some of the downtown design guidelines. But I don't want to speak out of turn. I know Foster on the Park had the same no-build easement off the side of their park or side of their building that faces the park. Yes, so it does, obviously there's a value to that easement because the city could not build a building within that 8-foot zone. But let's hope there's never a building built there and the park remains and becomes remains a park forever. So that's why the ask is what it is.
Just to be clear, I'm not advocating that another building be built next to yours. I'm just trying to understand how we got to this point. I still am not clear why the building couldn't have been designed to meet the building code without coming to us for an easement. But the good news is you did that. So thanks. And we're gonna work on the, as the mayor said, the business deal side of this. I just was wondering what that's about. I still don't get it. And I don't need to. That's fine. I'm not a building designer or developer. I'm just a politician. The wetland temporary easements on the wetlands, I noticed that at least one of them on the, maybe the one on the west side, indicates that will be rebuilt. Wetland to, oh no, the one on the north is to be rebuilt.
Correct.
Does that mean that the temporary construction easement is going to make it, is it going to do something bad to it that has to be rebuilt, or does rebuilt mean rebuilt from its current condition?
Right now there is I'll say it's an under-maintained and really not functioning level spreader there that does treat some of the skate park. It's really not functioning today, but it is still there, and there's some water that goes through it. It is being rebuilt because with the additional impervious surface we're adding to the skate park area between the skate park and Rigsby, additional impervious, it creates additional stormwater to go to that device. So it's being rebuilt to be bigger and actually treat more stormwater. So because the additional impervious we're adding to the skate park, we need to increase that facility. It could not function as it is today.
What about the one on the west? Isn't that where the creek is?
There's actually a device between this project and the overlook improvements and the creek. There is a wetland, well, not really wetland, I think it's a bioretention area down there. There's very minimal work, I think maybe raising an outlet structure or a pipe a little higher, but that facility will remain.
Okay, and are you going to put like construction materials on top of it while you're building the building?
No, it's in a temporary construction easement only because we had to get down there and to increase a riser, but the plants and all the material will actually stay. So it's the temporary construction easement is bigger and badder than it really looks like it is going to be there.
Yeah, that's the piece I was missing. That's actually really, really helpful. Thank you. That's all I had right now. I appreciate your time. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Council Member. Other questions or comments, colleagues? Councilmember Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. I don't know that I've been in a development meeting before, so this is probably my first in the 3 years. And so I did have a few questions. Do you own the property already?
Yes.
Okay. And I appreciate Councilmember Reese's question because it also added another question to my list in acknowledging that so what you're talking about going up 10 stories. The 10 stories is already essentially by right.
It's a 5-story residential building with 2 stories of parking tucked underneath.
Okay.
So it's not 10 stories. It is what we have shown and the site plan is, I believe, by right. Is that Jeremy? Is that correct, Jeremy?
That's correct. Yes.
So 5 stories and 2 stories underneath by right.
Correct.
Okay. And then the skate park side, I think I remember this coming forward and the folks at the skate park being upset about this being built. I think that was some of the conversation in the community. But just noting that, is there any conversation or anything that's included in the developer agreement that acknowledges that this is a kind of a very youth-centered area, and so the folks won't be buying 600 and up condominiums and then thinking that they should call the police to tell the kids to stop playing in the skate park?
It's very clearly noted on the plans as a skate park being directly next to it. It's being marketed as being directly next to an active urban park, and we think that adds value. And we think there are people that want to buy directly next to an active urban park. And evidence of that is folks at the other communities that are located around and surrounding the park. People do want to be next to and in direct proximity to an urban park. And there's a good market for that. And we think that there are obviously people that use the park and make various uses of it, and we think people that want to live there will welcome that. That's what we're marketing for.
And then I just had a question for staff, really around assessing whether or not the space should remain open versus built. And I'm not sure who exactly that would be directed to. Okay, Ms. Parrish. I was just wondering, so what is the like criteria look like when you're making the decision on a development plan like this, where you might consider actually buying them out and continuing to expand our open space availability?
Before you answer, Ms. Parrish, let me just ask, I believe there's a matter of public record, so maybe what was the price of that land, Mr. Kuhn?
I don't have that information right in front of me, Mr. Mayor. I'll be glad to get it for you.
I believe it was, at the time it was sold, it was the most expensive land ever sold in Durham.
Yeah.
So I'm only saying that, Councilmember Freeman, because I'm pretty sure we couldn't afford to buy that.
Yeah.
But I'd love, but go ahead, Councilmember Freeman and Ms. Parrish, do you have any comments?
And I can give a little bit more precursor on this. I'm concerned that we still don't have open space staff. And I know we've been having this conversation a little bit, but just acknowledging that these are the types of projects that are going to come forward with the most expensive piece of land in Durham being purchased. And then we move forward with development agreements at $1,000 a unit for affordable housing, or $5,000 a unit for affordable housing. No, we can't build it for $5,000. But I'm just trying to figure out how staff is making an assessment in this, independent of council.
May I interject one issue?
Let's hear from Mr. Ferguson. Thank you. Mr. Ferguson?
Thank you, Mayor. Bo Ferguson, Deputy City Manager. I just wanted to frame the issue for council that these discussions with the council are rare, but they come forward when a developer requests a certain property transaction to make their development happen. The analysis we bring you is just that. It is an analysis of a real estate transaction. We attempt to verify the values. We attempt to assess the impacts to our property, and we attempt to lay that before the council for you to make a decision. I would not want staff to represent that we have made a detailed analysis of keeping this as open space versus using it versus the private development moving forward. I think really that lies in the purview of the council. So the information we're presenting today is an analysis of this transaction. It is not necessarily a recommendation for or against the transaction, but an attempt to assess the fairness of the value that's been laid forward, and as has been represented, to vet the proposed improvements to the park to ensure that they are consistent with the policies that Durham Central Park and our relationship with Durham Central Park has brought forward over time. So I would say we don't have the answer to Councilmember Freeman's question. We have not done an analysis of this as open space because it is not our property.
Thank you. Thank you. And acknowledging, I think I'm not sure how much of that area is actually city land. I know that the Durham Central Park is a private nonprofit. And so I'm just acknowledging that this area has a lot of open space in the central Durham area. And yeah, we're giving up more open space for this development. And so just noting that. I had one.
Councilmember, just one thing that, and I think Mr. Dawson may have been coming on to comment. Mr. Dawson, can you comment on the ownership of Durham Central Park?
Tom Dawson, Assistant Director for Durham Parks and Recreation. The park is publicly owned. We have a lease with Durham Central Park Incorporated to manage the park and manage the farmers market. They've been involved with the negotiations, as has the skaters and DPR throughout the two or 3 year process.
So all of Central Park is owned by the city of Durham. And we could expand all of Central Park if we could manage to purchase the most expensive strip of land purchased in Durham. And this conversation is about negotiating for 8 feet at $1,000 per affordable housing unit. And I forgot how much for schools. I think I didn't see that actually on there. But I will note that the numbers are really low, and it's interesting. So I'll leave it at that. Let my colleagues cover.
Thank you, council member. Mr. Kuhn, did you want to comment?
I mean, we're willing to continue that dialogue, and we'll discuss that. I absolutely. I understand the issue. I will point out, this is a formal metal fabricating site. It's contaminated. So I mean, it's obviously City of Durham probably has other contaminated properties, but this is a contaminated property, and this is it to make it an active part of the tax base again, and that's what this project was proposed to do, and that's what our client proposes to do, and we'll address the issues. I understand your concerns, and I appreciate those, and we're going to be talking with those and get back to you very shortly.
Thank you, Mr. Kuhn. Colleagues, other questions or comments? Mayor Pro Tem Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a similar concern around people who are moving into this area, having a sense of what the area is like before they move in, based on some of the previous issues that we had with the park and the folks that lived at the Liberty Warehouse apartments. And in my previous conversations was assured that the marketing would include information about the park, the activities in the park, so that people who are moving here know the kind of neighborhood that they're moving into. But I just want to reiterate that we all like what's happening at Durham Central Park. We like that there's a lot of people there. We like that it's noisy. We want it to be that kind of community gathering space where everyone feels welcome. And so as we're continuing to build up the areas around the park, I just think it's really important to reiterate our vision for downtown that is inclusive, and that we expect that folks are coming to live in downtown because they value that as well, and not folks who are going to be concerned about things that might be happening in the park. We are excited about kids skating and drum corps practicing and ciphers happening and all of the cool stuff that happens in our downtown, and we want to protect that and keep that energy as we continue to build these developments. And I think it's concerning when you've got people buying a really expensive piece of property, which is they're making an investment, and we just want them to know the kind of investment that they're making in the neighborhood that they're moving into. So appreciate any of y'all's efforts to proactively communicate with your clients and potential buyers that the park is how we like it, and we hope they like it too. I just wanted to say, I think this deal, so I do agree with the mayor. I would love to see a stronger contribution to the affordable housing. I was trying to remember the deal that we negotiated with the Foster, I believe. And I think this one's better. I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and check, but I feel better about it. So I feel like it's better. I would rather, sorry?
Jeremy, do you know the information on the Foster?
I could probably pull it up pretty quickly. I believe it was 100,000. It was a lot more units though. So I think per unit it was less of a contribution, but it was maybe overall a larger dollar amount.
Okay. Good to know. I was also thinking back to the developer exchange we did for the property over on the future loop trail, where we traded a section of parking, and the staff had essentially negotiated like an even trade, that the value of what was coming to the city was the same as the value that was going to the developer. I, of course, from my position, like a deal where more is going to the city than is going to the developer. And I think that is the kind of deals that, I think those are the kind of deals that we should be negotiating, on behalf of our residents, and also because y'all need us more than we need you. So I think this is a good deal for us, for the people of the city, and that I want to just communicate to our staff that I appreciate this negotiation that we've managed to get more value than we are putting into this deal, unlike the previous one. And I would love for us to keep doing that whenever we have the opportunity. These deals are, unlike a rezoning and some of the other ways in which we interact with development that are highly regulated by state law and have lots of restrictions on what we can do and what we can ask for. These are opportunities for us to really maximize the potential public benefits of these development agreements. And I want to appreciate our staff for moving us in that direction. Thank you.
And I would like to do that on behalf of the developer too. We had a very positive experience working with all of your staff. They were very helpful in working out some of the issues, and it was a good process.
That's great to hear. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Councilmember Freelon.
Thank you. I've appreciated hearing the discussion. I just had a kind of a question. If this is a business transaction and we're negotiating for resources to kind of sweeten the kitty for the city, which I like that as well, Mayor Pro Tem. I'm curious what walking away from the table looks like. I mean, what if we said no? Do we have a clear, could someone explain to me in clear terms in case I missed it, what would happen if we said no?
We wouldn't, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeremy, we wouldn't be able to build that building for which a site plan was approved by the city and for which the Board of Adjustment approved variances. And
That's correct, Ben. I mean, that's the kind of the cold hard truth about it. It would probably end up being redesigned to be a building that would be smaller. To Councilman Reese's point, maybe pull it back 10 feet from each property line, so we don't need a no build easement. Probably not need any easements, in which case wouldn't need to ask for any, just to be frank about it, the overlook improvements and the skate park improvements. I mean, they're an exchange for the easements. So we could possibly just redesign the building to be smaller and 100% by right, but that's not what the developer wants to do. Both from building a project that he wants, as well as improving the park and the appearance around this site and his project. So,
thank you. Yeah, I'm not suggesting that as a desirable outcome. I'm just hoping to understand what that would look like. And I mean, I think I would presume that means less density. Well, yeah, definitely less density, and maybe even more expensive than $600K for a smaller number of units. So anyway, I'm just, as I think about pros and cons here, because a lot of what's done here is by right. You're really just talking about 8 feet. If there was a significant contribution on the proffer side, in addition to what you're already offering, I mean, I see that as the better outcome than the alternative. So, in case anybody's scratching their heads about how they're going to vote today, that's what's informing my vote, is that this is a better outcome. So.
Thank you, Councilmember. I see Ms. Poston is here and may have some comments, and then we'll get to Councilmember Caballero. Ms. Poston, you're not available to be heard yet.
I apologize, Mayor. Stacey Poston, General Services Department. Just a point of clarification on the site plan. The site plan, while approved, does include language that is contingent upon the securing of these easements by council's approval. So just point of clarification.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Poston. Councilmember Caballero.
Yeah, I just wanted to provide a little bit of historic context because I was on the Central Park Board as a city council liaison when this piece of property first came on. I know Councilmember Freelon is the liaison now, and former Councilmember Alston was there for a minute as well. And there was discussion on the city purchasing this land, and it was just way beyond our reach at the time. So to Councilmember Freeman's point, it wasn't that wasn't thought through or discussed. It was just something that we couldn't find the resources for. Additionally, I appreciate my colleagues leaning in a little bit more on the affordable housing donation. I think that that's absolutely the right way to go. And then one thing that I do want to make clear is that there was robust outreach to the skater community, and I want to appreciate Tom Dawson from Parks and Rec around that. He has done deep engagement with that community for several years. And I do want to emphasize what the Mayor Pro Tem said. It's not just the skate park. Hunt Street has constant vending, food trucks in front of it. And so it is a high trafficked piece of property. So to really let folks know that they're moving into an urban core and not the suburbs is something that we really need to emphasize to folks. There have been plenty of battles around this in Durham, and we want a vibrant community. If folks want the quiet, idyllic suburbs, there are other options than moving into the downtown area.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Freelon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Javier, Julie, both of you mentioning that makes me think about a potential for kind of collaboration. I don't know, maybe it's something we could talk about more at a later date. But I think, advertising something as urban clearly has not been sufficient to prevent folks paying these exorbitant prices for a downtown condo from calling the cops on kids when they're making noise in the park. And so I wonder if there's an opportunity for some, some political education for your residents around, just what being a good neighbor is about. I don't know. I'm just kind of dreaming, but that would be an interesting avenue for collaboration with the city, and particularly now in a post-George Floyd, America, as people are beginning to understand the relationship between, calling the cops on somebody for a noise violation as an extension of violence, systemic violence against usually, people of color, kids, youth. That's an act of violence. And maybe there's some stuff we could do on the city side around kind of noise ordinance, and maybe with safety and wellness, we could think about who we deploy to address those types of complaints to reduce harm. But anyway, I would love if y'all would be open to, I don't know, including that in your informational packet,
I don't think there's any I think that's a good idea. I mean, if you have literature on those types of things, if it's something, I'll talk to the client about it for sure. I mean, I'm not the marketing director, so I don't do that, but I would definitely keep that dialogue open. And we want to have people to be happy living here, because that's what we're selling. So that's part of what we're doing in terms of our marketing, to make sure they do understand, and they have to understand. I mean, it is where it is. It's in a dense, urban, active environment, and that's what you should expect, which is noise and sound and trains and horns and the like.
Yeah. This
is what I live next to. I live 125 feet from the center of a freight corridor. Mm-hmm. So I understand it. You have to understand there's going to be freight lines and people going by your house and everything else. So it's something, and I love it. And there's lots of people that love it.
Great. Well, thank you for indulging that little brainstorm. I know we have a long meeting, so I'm going to give the mic back to you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. All these are valuable comments. I appreciate them. Other comments, colleagues, or questions at this time? Mr. Coon and Mr. Anderson, thank you for being with us. We appreciate you.
Thank you very much for your time and attention and consideration. We really appreciate it. We'll definitely be in touch, Mayor.
Yes, thank you very much. And I do want to say again, we're often in these rezoning situations where we have zero leverage on things like affordable housing, but we're not in that situation now. And I just will say again, I think that for a $600,000 condo, a $5,000 per unit contribution to our affordable housing fund makes a lot of sense. It seems quite proportional. Mr. Anderson's right. We at Foster on the Park, I think it's called Foster on the Park, it was less, and it was substantially less, but also things have changed in downtown Durham. The prices of these units are going up. And I think that this is a good opportunity to reflect that reality. But So I appreciate you being with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for all your comments. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And Ms. Parrish, thank you. Thank you for the work that you all have done.
Thank you.
All right, colleagues, we have a final item, and that's item 38, and this is the commuter rail report. But before we do that, we're going to take a 5-minute break, and we will be back at 3:30. We'll be back at 3:30. We're all going to go and get a snack. So we'll all be back at 3:30. And so I remind you to please mute your microphone. All right, colleagues. I hope everybody has had a refreshing snack. And it's now 3:30 and we're going to continue our agenda. And we're going to now hear a report on the Greater Triangle Commuter Rail update. And I'll turn it over to the folks from Go Triangle.
Thank you, Mayor Schul. Good afternoon, Mayor, Madam Pro Tem, and members of council. My name is Jay Hikas, Senior Transportation Planner with Go Triangle. I'm also joined on the call today by Elise Lien from our consulting team, who will deliver an update on our first phase of public engagement. Let's see, and I'm also running the slides, so we have to multitask. This feasibility study is a feasibility study. We are early in the life of a major capital project, to set some context, that's represented in the graphic below. The goal of this study is that Go Triangle, on behalf of locally and regionally adopted transit plans, as well as our county partners and NPO partners, provide information about the viability of the rail project to the community and elected officials in coordination with the transit plan updates to help reach a decision on whether or not to proceed with the rail project, and if so, how, when, and at what cost share among local, state, and federal partners. Go Triangle is the project sponsor. We are coordinating the study among these partners that you see here. As mentioned, this includes the Metropolitan Planning Organizations, NCDOT, North Carolina Railroad, and the counties, of course. So why are we talking about large regional transit capital projects? The Triangle continues to add new jobs and be a popular place to move, even during the pandemic and as we recover from the pandemic. Durham County alone is projected to grow by over 100,000 people in the next 25 years. The larger 3-county region will add more than 600,000 people. And it's not just about the new people coming. The benefits and costs of this growth are felt by everyone, and they're not equitably distributed among the people who live here now. And this is particularly true for people who do not have a car. And it's especially true when it comes to jobs and job access. Over the next 20 years, 2 out of every 3 jobs in the larger Triangle region will be located in Wake County. And it's essential to provide transit that connects Durham residents to opportunities for career advancement and good paying jobs, both in Durham and across the region. Across the region, there are over 40,000 households where there are more workers than vehicles. And that's just today, and that number probably grows into the future. And this includes households with no vehicle access, but it also includes households where there is only one vehicle, but multiple people with jobs. And those families, folks have to find a way to share that vehicle or rely on another way of getting around. And today, as you can see from these maps, this is from a 2019 report that the Metropolitan Planning Organization released, job access without a car is a challenge. These jobs show how many jobs that someone can get, these maps shows how many jobs someone can get to using a car compared to using transit. And these maps are at different scales. Red means more jobs, green means relatively fewer jobs. And on average, someone with access to a car can get to about 5 times the number of job opportunities as can someone without a car. And the way these jobs are laid out reflects where the jobs are in the region, the way these maps are laid out. And that means, and it's partly a factor of the fact that we have a large region, jobs are in greater RTP, Northwest Wake County, as well as Raleigh. And our transit network does not do a good job of connecting folks outside of the downtowns to these job centers. And I'd say this is not a new challenge. We know that our region is large. And this is one of the reasons why the region and the voters approved a transit transit plan to invest in transit access to destinations within Durham, as well as destinations within the larger region, including a rail project connecting Durham and Wake counties. And this map shows those regional transit connections across the region envisioned in currently adopted county transit plans. At a high level, the overarching objective of these plans is to identify transit investments to build a cohesive network that meets the needs of transit riders, employers, and the community as a whole, both to destinations within each county and across the larger region. So on behalf of and in coordination with the transit plan updates, we are studying an initial rail service between Durham and Garner with a possible inclusion of service out to Clayton. This would primarily be service during peak periods for about 4 hours in the afternoon and in the evening, service every 30 minutes, as well as some trips in the midday and evening for a total of 20 round trips per day. And this compares to about 18 round trips per day on the Durham-Raleigh Express service today. The study includes 5 stops in Durham. Those are in West Durham near Duke and VA Medical Centers, Durham Station, East Durham near Alston Avenue, Ellis Road, and RTP. In each of these cases, we are looking at ways in which the bus network, as well as our bike and pedestrian network, provides access to these stations. And in particular, the station at RTP would be co-located with a new regional transit center, allowing convenient multimodal last mile connections, whether they be microtransit or shared ride, or bus connections, or bike connections to destinations in and around RTP, such as Hub RTP, and places like the Apple campus and RDU Airport. As mentioned, this study builds on previous studies. And from those previous studies, we've learned a number of things that we are looking to validate and get more precision on as we continue this study. The first is that there be more than 10,000 trips by 2040. Today, we have about 2,200 bus riders in that corridor. Among those bus riders, 42% do not have access to a car, 44% are from households earning less than $25,000, and 67% of those 2,200 riders are non-white. In terms of the travel time, we're looking at about 45 minutes to 50 minutes from Durham to Raleigh, and that represents a significant time savings over the current express bus today, and an even larger time savings over the routes that are not express. The capital cost is about $1.8 billion for that shorter segment from Durham to Clayton. That is a year of expenditure dollars. So if the dollar to build the project was spent in 2028, the dollar is inflated out to that year. The higher cost, $2.1 billion, is the cost of including service to Clayton. Operating cost is similar. That's reflected in base year dollars. So 2019, that's $29 million for the shorter service, $37 million for a longer service, with the assumption that that all the trains are going to Clayton. And I'd add this is an estimate that is based on other peer railroad systems. It is an all-inclusive cost for operating. It includes staff, it includes fuel, it includes maintenance. It also includes things such as the cost of liability insurance, as well as any access payments to the railroad that occur on an annual basis. So that's what we know now. What are we working on now to better understand the viability of this project? Excuse me. There are 3 main components of the analysis. The first is the rail analysis that focuses on service, the infrastructure that's needed to support it, as well as some of the technical work that also supports it. The second is the opportunity analysis, that's made up of several component parts you see here on the screen. That is primarily being led by Triangle J Council of Governments. And then the third major piece is engagement, both with the members of the public and organizations and focus groups, as well as engagement with our stakeholders such as local governments and railroads. And I'll go into some more detail on each of these in a few more slides. So one of the primary tasks that's a part of that first bucket of work, the rail analysis, is the downtown Durham engineering analysis. And we're undertaking this now to help us understand how new tracks and station platforms can be added to downtown Durham, and how that will affect things like the current street crossings, traffic, and utilities in and around downtown. From previous efforts, we know that these issues are incredibly important to many in Durham, and from a project viability perspective, it is essential to understand how these challenges will be solved early as a part of this study, prior to a decision to move forward with implementing a rail project. This work is well underway. The existing conditions such as environmental screening and surveys, as well as existing and base year conditions for traffic model have been completed. We have initiated and continue to meet about monthly with the city, county, MPO, NCDOT, and North Carolina Railroad to review and obtain concurrence on the technical materials as this study progresses. Go Triangle has entered into a reimbursement agreement with the city The city has procured a consultant, I believe it's Kimley Horn, to help support their review of some of these technical materials that are produced as part of this process. And we were also continuing to develop the concepts that would show how we would add tracks and other rail infrastructure in coordination with these technical stakeholders, including city staff. And as these concepts are developed and their impacts are better understood, we will share them with downtown stakeholders and the community as a whole as a part of a future phase of public engagement. We really want folks to have a good understanding of what the impacts and how rail infrastructure could be added in downtown before we reach a decision point at the end of the study. The second component of the study work is this opportunity analysis that's being led by the Triangle J Council of Governments. The first report, which is nearing completion, is an analysis of affordable housing along the rail line. This report identifies how many legally binding affordability restricted, or LBAR, homes, as well as naturally occurring affordable homes, are located near rail stations. This slide that I have shown on the screen is focused on those legally binding affordable homes. And as you can see, a significant portion of those homes, about 37%, are within about a mile of the rail corridor, and even more are a short bike or bus ride away. TJCOG is also looking at planned affordable homes. Through the investments planned by the city, county, Durham Housing Authority, including those funded by the housing bond, the number of affordable homes near stations in Durham will nearly double over the next 10 years. TJCOG is also working on an access analysis, primarily looking at connecting neighborhoods and communities to jobs, which will help understand how rail will benefit various communities around the region. And this map shows how it would provide those connections. The first map there on the left shows disadvantaged neighborhoods using a regional metric. So you see homes that have relatively low incomes, lower vehicle access, are non-white, and also in purple there you see have large concentrations of affordable homes. On the right side, you see where those major job centers are within the region. This report is still ongoing, and we hope to have more to share about this soon. And the last piece, so that third element, particularly stakeholder engagement, is the last one I want to touch on before I turn it over to Elise to talk about our public engagement. Let's see. So if this project were to move forward, the Federal Transit Administration would require that Go Triangle, as a project sponsor, must identify third-party agreements and commit to a plan and schedule for executing those agreements as a part of project development, which would be the next step should a decision be made to move this project forward. Given the importance to this project of identifying and addressing critical project success factors, the length of time involved, and lessons learned from previous projects, Go Triangle has developed a plan to ensure that progress is being made with respect to railroad engagement and coordination as a part of this study, which is ahead of when FTA would otherwise require it. So our railroad stakeholder coordination plan is a safeguard to ensure that as technical work progresses and deliverables are completed, that agreements with railroad partners are also simultaneously progressing. The goal is to continue to incrementally reach points of agreement and then progressively build on those points. The first point was the Memorandum of Understanding that memorializes the parties' understandings with respect to ongoing and future partnership on this specific study. Let's see. And as of last week, Go Triangle, NCDOT, North Carolina Railroad, and Norfolk Southern Railroad have all signed and entered into an agreement for rail network modeling and also by acknowledging the railroad's position on indemnity and liability requirements pertaining to the implementation of rail service. And at the conclusion of this study, Go Triangle intends to seek another MOU or similar agreement to clarify the parties, including the railroads, understanding of all major issues affecting rail implementation and how those issues will be addressed should this project move forward. So to wrap up our technical update here, at the end of the study, the goal is to achieve regional consensus on the following elements: the project concept, which is the components that make up the project, the cost share among all the partners, community support of the project, as well as support from railroads, local governments, and third parties. The study outcome would be a decision point to undertake engineering, final engineering, and construction, including the FTA new starts and NEPA process. With that, I'll turn it over to Elise to talk about our public engagement.
Thanks, Jay, and thank you, Mr. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and council members for your time and attention. The public engagement piece of this commuter rail study consists of 3 rounds. The first round was completed in fall of 2020 with the goals primarily of raising awareness about the project and the study, and to obtain public feedback, and also, as Jay spoke about, coordinating regionally with our regional stakeholders and partners. The primary piece of this public engagement round was a large public survey that was offered online and in paper form for people to fill out. We saw large numbers of participation and lots of enthusiasm about participating in the survey. There were 5,600 survey views, 2,700 unique participants who participated, interacted in some way with our survey. And you can see the enthusiasm that we really had at the beginning, especially we had 500 participants within just the first 3 days of putting the survey out there. All this participation led to nearly 5,000 project-related comments. Those comments were in the form of open-ended comments that we included on the survey. So we got to hear perspectives from a lot of different people in a lot of different ways. Next slide, please. So a topmost goal for this survey and this outreach effort was our equity and inclusion. Toward that goal, Go Triangle put forward their Maximizing Participation initiative, through which they spent a lot of time utilizing community partnerships to reach populations who are historically underrepresented in the transit planning process, with groups such as Advanced Community Health, Meals on Wheels of Durham, and the North Carolina Society for Hispanic Professionals to partner with us for getting that survey out into the public. One of the very creative, I think, kind of pivots, especially during the time of COVID, that the Go Triangle team did was they worked with Advanced Community Health to give out information about the survey, to give out brochures about the study at a COVID testing site in Durham, which I thought was really creative way to reach people in a time when we're not we weren't reaching people in person very often. The survey was also made accessible in a variety of non-English languages to sort of bridge that gap. Due to this initiative, 203 unique participants were reached directly, and it resulted in 399 or 8% of our project-related comments in the survey. A variety of efforts were undertaken. Again, this is during our year plus of COVID. So a combination of both in-person, CDC compliant outreach efforts and virtual efforts were undertaken to reach the public for this outreach effort. In particular, there were pop-up survey centers placed at Durham Station and at the Village in Durham to reach transit riders. Next slide, please. And a variety of both kind of modern, innovative outreach methods, and in addition to traditional paper survey distribution, brochures on buses, all that kind of stuff. A variety of methods and materials were used to be able to get out into the public and encourage participation in our survey. Next slide, please. We did see a lot of engagement through our social media outreach, through the Go Forward website. There was a feature on the project placed on Spectacular Magazine. And one of the things that we saw was that the average time spent on the webpage for the rail project was 3 minutes and 38 seconds, which, you know, in this time of clicking around very quickly and scrolling, we actually thought that was a pretty good amount of engagement that people were spending thinking about and learning about this project. Next slide, please. Okay, so we had, one of the things that we had in our survey was really good kind of participation in people providing us with their demographic information. And this slide gives us sort of a snapshot of who we heard from. And we're going to be talking about that in some more detail in the upcoming slides. So this slide gives you the breakdown, the race and ethnicity of our survey participants, and also gives you the kind of the raw numbers of folks who participated. A lot of surveys see very much lower numbers than this one did, so we wanted to highlight that that we saw in across our categories, we saw pretty robust numbers of participants. Next slide, please. So importantly, how does the participation from the survey mirror the actual breakdown of racial and ethnic makeup of the community? So this slide shows you the corridor counties, which is Wake, Durham, and Johnston counties combined, and how they combine to census data. And our next slide lets us see Durham County specifically and Durham County survey participants. And we can see where we reached, where we see maybe gaps that need to be addressed in future outreach efforts. Next slide, please. This slide gives you kind of just some of that same information, but lets you see our total survey population, our corridor survey population, which again is Durham, Wake, and Johnston counties combined, and then shows you Durham, Wake, and Johnston counties separated out. One thing that you can note is that in Durham County, we did have a more diverse participant universe than in the other counties. Next slide, please. This slide gives you an idea of the income bracket breakdown that we had among our survey participants, and also how it compares to census data. Next slide, please. This slide gives us kind of just a bird's eye view of, in our triangle area, where were our participants coming from. You can see that Durham had great participation there, particularly South Durham. Next slide, please. Wake County gave us the highest percentage of participants, which makes sense, but Durham had nothing to be shy about, with 25% of participation in our survey. Durham was the highest municipality in terms of participation, with 680 participants in our survey. Next slide. And this slide just gives you a little more of a zoomed in look at what zip codes the Durham participants were coming from. So in terms of what we heard from our participants in the survey, the major takeaways that we heard were that in terms of benefits that people saw coming from commuter rail, people saw commuter rail as reducing congestion in the triangle generally, as having environmental benefits versus driving individual cars. People expected commuter rail to decrease or improve their commute. And we saw a lot of comments about bringing the triangle up to sort of modern metropolitan standards, people pointing to peer cities and other areas that they would like to see the triangle compare more favorably to in terms of transit offerings. And we saw also a lot of comments about commuter rail helping to bring sort of a sense of connectivity throughout the triangle. Where we did hear concerns, we heard that people were concerned about project cost and funding allocation. There were concerns about the effectiveness of commuter rail to serve the transit needs of the community. There were concerns about the inclusivity about commuter rail, about whether it would serve only kind of 9 to 5 commuters in certain income brackets. There were concerns about equitability and whether all geographic areas were being served by the project. And then sort of the more physical project impacts, right-of-way, noise, that kind of thing. Next slide, please. So these are, I'm going to jump into the questions that were actually asked on the survey, and then we'll kind of see what people said. The first question was, what would you like in a commuter rail that connects Durham and Wake counties? And what we saw was that people want in commuter rail the same thing they want in all kinds of transit. They want reliability, they want a schedule that works for them, they want frequency, and they want affordability. Those are kind of the top. The graphic that you're seeing here is these are the topics that came up most frequently in the comments that people made. And the comment at the bottom is the most upvoted comment that people were able to see other participants' comments and indicate if they agreed with it. So this is the one that got the most kind of votes, and that comment was pretty succinct: frequency, reliability, accessibility, and affordability. Next slide, please. So our second question was, what do you see commuter rail doing for your community? The effect on congestion was number one among what people said. Second to that, people talked a lot about benefits to the environment. People also talked a lot about connectivity in the area. I'm sorry, on that question, we are also able to look at, because of the way the question was worded, it gives us a chance to say, are people saying that they're seeing positive things coming from commuter rail, or are they seeing negative things? Are they seeing the outcome of commuter rail to be a positive or a negative? So this is one of the things we looked at. Overwhelmingly, we found that people answered this question in a positive light. So in our overall survey universe, the positive responses were 87%, with 10% negative. If we sort of filter out that data and take a closer look at who's saying what, if we're looking at the minority or non-white population, that positivity rate actually went up to 90%. If we look specifically at the city of Durham and we and further filter down to lower income bracket of less than $50,000 a year, we're still at 90% positivity rate. If we're looking at Durham City non-white population, it's an 89% positivity rate. So overall, very positive. Next slide, please. This slide just gives you an idea of when we did have negative comments, what were people talking about? And when we did have positive comments, what were people talking about? One thing I would point out that is that you can see the raw numbers of the comments are much lower in the negative than they are in the positive. But nonetheless, we wanted to point out, what are people talking about when they're pointing out negatives versus positives? So project cost was number one when people were seeing negatives with the commuter rail project. And like we talked about, congestion, environment, connectivity were the top things in the positive comments. Next slide, please. And the third and final question, at the end of this study, local leaders will decide whether to move forward with the proposed commuter rail train. What else should they be, excuse me, what else should they be considering to make that decision? Project cost was top of mind for people. Equity was also very important. Growth, as in population growth in the triangle and how that's being handled, and the effect on the environment. Those were sort of the things that bubbled to the top in terms of what everybody was talking about. And the comment that was most upvoted, voted 150 people said they agreed with it, or they agreed with this comment, was we need to catch up with other regional metropolitan areas like Charlotte and Atlanta to stay relevant for industries and businesses considering relocating to the Mid-Atlantic or Southeast US. Mass transit will be the way of the future, and if not now, then when? So there was a lot of sentiment like that. Next steps, the public involvement group at Go Triangle conducted focus groups, which allowed them to focus in on certain groups that they might not have heard as much from in the survey, and to kind of further investigate themes that were raised within the survey. So looking at people's understanding of the project, looking at costs and affordability, what does that mean to them for the project to be, for a trip on the train to be an affordable trip on the train for them? about completing those first mile, last mile connections for people and their service needs. We have our two upcoming public comment periods in the summer and coming up in the fall, in which we're going to have ongoing education and outreach to keep up the flow of information about the project and make sure we're continuing to have in public input coming in. So with that, Jay and I are happy to answer any questions about the project or our public outreach.
Thank you very much, Mr. Heikes and Ms. Beelan. Have I got your name right, Ms. Beelan? Great. Can you take down the slides, please? Thank you. Well, good job. You had 30 minutes allocated and you hit it exactly. My kind of presentation. Colleagues, questions and comments for our friends here from Go Triangle. Councilmember Freeman and then Councilmember Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just going to note, I really appreciate the presentation and just note I feel like I shared some feedback previously and I feel like a lot of it's been incorporated and I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to thank the folks from Go Triangle and their consulting partner for what I think is probably the best presentation I've seen about the commuter rail project, and I've seen a ton of them. So, great work in getting a lot of information out. I did have a couple of questions. I didn't notice anything about talking about the specific agreement between Go Triangle and Norfolk Southern Railroad. Has that agreement been finalized?
So there'll need to be a number of agreements with the railroads. The first of which is that agreement for what's called rail network modeling, and that has been signed.
Great. And did that include the requirement that that Norfolk Southern be indemnified for their own gross negligence and willful misconduct?
I am not a legal expert, so I'm not going to take a stab at that, but I will be happy to get that question back to you, get an answer back to you on that.
Okay.
What I can say is that there was apart from the specifics of what was agreed to, it was less of an agreement and more of an understanding of the railroad's position is.
Okay, great.
We'll let our legal team get back to you and possibly correct me on what I just said, but that is my layman's non-lawyer understanding of it.
Awesome. I think the short version is the railroad has been insisting that that they be indemnified for all sorts of things that could happen along their track in connection with this project, including the railroad's own gross negligence and willful misconduct, which is obviously a huge problem because without their agreement, there's not any possibility of building this project. So they have the project over a barrel. They understand that, and they're extracting this this really severe form of indemnification as one of their prices. And I just think that's something we gotta be aware of and understand. That's because that's something we're all going to be on the hook for if bad things happen. I wanted to talk a little bit about the ridership estimates for this project. If I read it correctly, they show growth from about 2,200 current trips to something in the neighborhood of 10,000 trips in 2040. Is that directionally correct?
So I didn't show you base year ridership trips. Those 2,200 are the number of transit users on bus services that parallel the commuter rail route today.
Mr. Heikes, we're having a little bit trouble hearing you, Mr. Heikes.
Oh, sorry, say that again.
We're having a little trouble hearing you, and you're apparently having a little trouble hearing me. So, yeah.
Let me try that again. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah, better.
Okay, perfect. I'll stand closer to the microphone here. So the 10,000 is that 2040 estimate. The 2,200 is the number of current transit riders on those bus routes that are operating and stopping in the CRT corridor today.
So that's a pretty big increase. And I guess I'm a little bit concerned about those projections, just because, we've just gone through an experience with the pandemic where a lot of employers are taking a second look at remote work. And I wonder if there's if there's going to be additional refinement of those estimates in light of some of the trends we're going to be seeing post COVID-19.
Yes, there absolutely will be. One of the things that FTA requires you to do is have an up-to-date onboard origin destination survey. That was previously scheduled for the region this past fall, but that has been delayed as FTA is determining the guidance on how to conduct that study going forward.
Great. Do we know what the fare is expected to be for this commuter rail project?
So the fare for this project has not yet been set. What I can say is that similar peer systems that have been implemented have a fare premium over the local bus. So in this case, local bus being Go Durham, Go Raleigh, which Go Durham previously was $1, Go Raleigh was previously approved to be $1.50. But the recent peer systems have a fare premium of somewhere between $0, about $3 per trip, more expensive than the local bus. Our region has relatively low transit fares, so I would expect us to be probably in the lower to mid range of that fare premium. However, that's a decision that board members, Go Triangle board members would make.
I'm assuming you heard that, Mr. Mayor. You did.
I listen to everything you say, Councilmember, all your questions.
Awesome. I guess I just want to put a pin in that because fares seem to be really important for this project for a bunch of different reasons, but especially because the folks who have concerns about it, pursuant to the engagement work, the fantastic engagement work that you did on this, one of their concerns is that this project would not serve those who need transit service the most. And to the extent that we expect the fare to be something well in excess of the current fare for the Go Triangle bus system, it puts this service out of reach for many riders. So I hope that the project is thinking about how to mitigate those impacts. Obviously, the service needs fares to survive and to thrive. Totally understand that. But that's one of the reasons I think why folks are concerned about it, is because of that equity piece to it. It's going to be hard for those folks to afford that level of service, especially when, and I think I read this slide right, it looks to me as though you're projecting somewhere between 15 and 30-minute transit improvement over current service, like the travel times will be reduced by about 15 to 30 minutes. It's not 100% clear to me that I see the value in that transaction for most folks. And so that's another thing I hope that we'll keep in mind as we go forward. And more broadly, as I've said about this project from the very beginning, I think commuter rail is an important part of our regional transportation strategy. I think commuter rail should be implemented. The issue is the same issue that, again, the folks that you have talked to in your community engagement process have told you is a critical concern to them, and that is project cost and funding allocation, which is the funding allocation between the jurisdictions that are jointly going to fund this project if and when it goes forward. And I will not beat the dead horse too much in this meeting, but the central fact is the folks who use Go Transit service now and will use the future commuter rail project look very different from the folks who use Go Durham buses and who rely on it as their sole means of transportation. And those are the transit systems that are competing for very limited dollars under the Durham County Transit Plan. I know I'm not telling you all anything you don't know. I just want to make sure that everybody who's watching this understands that these are the choices that we're going to have to make. And for better or worse, we as a city council aren't going to be the ones making them. So this is our only chance to beat the drum and hope that folks are listening and talking to their elected officials who do have an impact and get to vote on the Durham County Transit Plan to make sure that these issues are addressed. So that's all I had to say about it. But again, this is 100% the best presentation I've seen on this. It's a great job and appreciate all the work and look forward to seeing how that project develops going forward. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Council Member. Other comments and questions, colleagues? I have a couple. One of on the issue of fares, and I appreciate Councilmember Reese raising the issue of fares. It's super important. Will fare capping, will the same sort of fare capping be available on the commuter rail that is and for that matter, if we had bus rapid transit, as is available on local bus service?
I would be a strong advocate from a staff perspective for integrating the CRT fares into our.
Mr. Hikus, I'm sorry, I'm
so sorry. I'm so sorry. The answer is that's a decision that has not yet been made. But I think given the importance of building a cohesive network that builds those local and regional connections, I would hope that we would make that decision and hope that our board would consider that paramount.
Thank you. I think that a couple of the issues that Councilmember Reese raised are so important. And what I want to say about them, both the indemnification and and I think you all really raised the issue of going through downtown Durham, and I just am very appreciative of the fact that you're taking this on now and not at the end. And we've been there where it happened at the end, and it can't happen at the end. And so I just very much appreciate you taking on these threshold issues now. And I think you're doing a really good job of that, and I'm really grateful. I will say, I think the most important piece of information in here to me, and we didn't see the nationally occurring affordable housing lease. I didn't on that chart. That's not on the chart, is it?
That was not on the chart that I shared, but that will be included in the report that we're finalizing.
Yeah, good. I mean, to me, that's what is, a potential, a real game changer here is if we're going to have, I think, 7,000 units or something of which the subsidized housing, what we often call permanently subsidized housing, and you all call LBAR. That these are legally binding, affordable, restricted units. I think that, I think we'll have, 5, 6, 7,000 of those units in this corridor, especially near downtown, 5 or 6 years from now. And to me, that is an incredible asset for the commuter rail. And I think one that's underappreciated when we do think about our ridership and what they need. Because I think they will be transit riders. I do think the fare is an important issue there, and I think fare capping is going to be critical. Okay, those are my comments. Others, colleagues, questions? Mayor Pro Tem.
Thanks. Sorry, my hand keeps fading into the background. I'm wondering in terms of timeline, like at what point do we commit to we're going to move forward with this? And I'm so I can get a sense from colleagues about like what information, what parameters we would need to know by then to be like, okay, we are comfortable moving forward on this project.
Sure. And in terms of timeline, we expect that this study itself will be complete by the end of this calendar year. After signing the agreement, we understand from the railroads that they expect to move expeditiously through their work, which is one of the main drivers of timeline.
Speak up, Mr. Hikus.
I'm sorry. We expect that we'll be able to keep our schedule to the end of the year. And then following the completion of the study, we'll have probably about a 3-month or so period of regional decision making among the parties of the MOU, the counties, the MPOs, municipalities, the railroads, as well as third-party institutions. So that would be early 2022.
Thank you.
And is that when the cost share negotiations you think will be completed?
We would not, yes, they would be completed in advance of making a decision to move forward with the project. Or it is Go Triangle's recommendation that that be determined prior to advancing additional phases of this project.
And what level of the engineering through downtown Durham or the design through downtown Durham, or maybe a better question is, when do you think, just to go along with Mayor Pro Tem Johnson's question, when do you think that engineering and design and kind of decision-making around that, because that's clearly a threshold issue as well, I assume, for going forward. So is that in that same time frame early next year?
That is correct. We are hoping that we will have public engagement, and our next phase of public engagement, which Elise mentioned, will be at sometime during the summer. One of the drivers of that timeline is making sure we have information coming out of the technical study components that we're able to share with the public. The design of downtown Durham is an important piece of that. So we're hoping to at least have some preliminary information out there this summer. And then I believe we'd be about 10% design by the end of the year for that downtown Durham segment.
Great. Thank you. Other questions, colleagues? Anything else? Ms. Beelan and Mr. Heikes, thank you so much. I want to agree with what Councilmember Reese said. I think this makes sense. Your information is better all the time. You're doing a really good job of refining it. Your Councilmember Freeman, I think, alluded to the outreach, and I think it's all moving in a good direction. And I think our community is going to have a lot of information by which to make this decision. And we're grateful to you for being here. Thank you so much. And thanks for sticking with us through this meeting.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, colleagues, that was our last item, and we'll now move to our city clerk for a report on the appointments. Madam Clerk.
Good evening, everybody. I know this meeting's getting a little long, so I'll try to buzz through the boards, committee, and commission appointments efficiently. First of all, we have the Citizen Advisory Committee. Council has nominated Levon Barnes, Dr. Monique Holsey-Hyman, and Brian W. Langlis to be reappointed onto the CAC. And there are 3 seats that have been agreed to be re-advertised on that committee. The Durham Board of Adjustment appointments, Ian Kipp and Chad Meadows, have both been nominated for reappointment. Durham Open Space and Trails Commission appointment. This particular board, the position has been voted on to re-advertise that. So there was no appointment or nomination made for that. The Durham Planning Commission, council has nominated Aaron M. Durkin and Bruce N. Herod to fill the 2 seats on that particular board. The Durham Sports Commission appointment, Dan W. Hill III, who is reapplying, has been nominated to fill that seat. Housing Appeals Board appointment, the position for at-large alternate Elizabeth A. Husted has been nominated to fill that seat. The Mayor's Council for Women appointments for the Civil Rights Justice Sector, Kershimia Ramirez has been nominated. For the Public Safety Sector, Nana Asante Smith has also been nominated, and both of those are reapplying, so they're reappointments. For the Ward 2 seat, Ingrid Pohl has been nominated. And finally, for the Ward 3 seat, Anita A. Daniels-Kenny has been nominated for appointment. For the Participatory Budgeting Steering Committee appointment, Council has nominated Jen Fry, and she's also reapplying, so that is a reappointment for the at-large category. And then finally, we have the Human Relations Commission. I skipped over that because it sounds like we need to do some discussion. The appointment for residents to fill 5 vacancies on the Human Relations Commission representing 3 African American persons and 2 Caucasian non-Hispanic persons. Under the African American persons, council was allotted 3 appointments, and Aaron N. Carson is a reappointment, C. Dwayne Hinnant, and Darius J. Whitney. Whitney is a reappointment, and that brings us to we do not max out over the 53%. I think it's like 52.9% on the male allocation. And then under Caucasian non-Hispanic persons, council was instructed to choose 2. Christina L. Crosby is a reapplication, as well as Jeffrey R. King is a reapplication. And with all of the decisions of council for the nominations, again, we did not exceed the 53%.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. It sounds like we did what we needed to. Is there anything that we need to do now, Madam Clerk? I think all of our appointments, there's nothing we need to take up at this time, is there?
No, there's that one position that is open for re-advertisement, but everything else was decided on. And there was some emailing about the process. If we put the news release information on the ballot, I think that'll clarify how many and which type persons can be selected so that we don't violate the bylaws of the 53% requirement.
All right. Thank you very much. Thanks to you. Also, thanks to Ms. Rowland. I know what a job this is to manage now. We are very appreciative of you and Ms. Rowland. Thank you.
Yes, I want to echo that because Ms. Rowland and Ashley have been very hands-on when it comes to reading the bylaws, understanding them, making sure that all of the requirements are being met. And we've had some situations where the boards and committees want to do things outside their bylaws, and we have to lay down the law. So,
yep. And I know we don't make it all that easy for you either. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate everyone's cooperation. Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Madam Manager, are we ready to settle?
We are ready to settle, but I did want to get direction from the council on item 30. We did ask the developer who spoke to you today to bring some additional information, and I need to know if the council would like that item on consent or GBA.
GBA, please.
Good. All right. So for consent, we have items 1 through 29 and items 31 through 37. GBA, we have item 30. And GBA public hearings, we have item 39 through 42.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Colleagues, you have heard the manager's recommendation to settle the agenda, and I now accept a motion for its approval.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Freelon, seconded by Councilmember Reese, or vice versa. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Schul?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson?
Aye.
Councilmember Caballero?
Aye.
Councilmember Freelon?
Aye.
Councilmember Freeman?
Aye.
Councilmember Reese?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Madam Manager. Great meeting, long meeting, but a lot of good work. Thanks to you and to our whole staff, and thanks to you, colleagues. I think we did pretty well today. Have we done it? I believe we have.
Awesome.
I think our
you.
next times together will be the budget meetings next week, and I very much look forward to that. And I will declare this meeting adjourned at 4:24 p.m.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks,
Bye, y'all.
everybody.